Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, you know, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann, people who support our program there get, you know, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to patreon.com/Thom Hartmann and check out what we're doing and support our program. Thank you. Today, from Birthright Citizens, A History of Race and Rights in Antebellum America by Martha S. Jones. In the introduction, Rights of Colored Men Debating Citizenship in Antebellum America is the title of the introduction. The title of William Yates's 1838 treatise, Rights of Colored Men, aptly captures the subject of this book. The 19th century Americans for whom Yates wrote were fascinated by a juridical puzzle. Not slaves, nor aliens, nor the equals of free white men, who were former slaves and their descendants before the law. None were more interested in this question than black Americans themselves, and Birthright Citizens takes up their point of view to tell the history of race and rights in the antebellum United States. The pressures brought on by so-called black laws and colonization schemes, especially a radical strain, explain why free people of color feared their forced removal from the United States. In response, they claimed an unassailable belonging, one grounded in birthright citizenship. No legal text expressly provided for such, but their ideas anticipated the terms of the 14th Amendment. Set in Baltimore, a place between North, South, and the Atlantic world, this book traces the scenes and the debates through which black Americans developed ideas about citizenship and claims to the rights that citizens enjoyed. Along the way, they engaged with legislators, judges, and law's everyday administrators. From the local courthouse to the chambers of high courts, the rights of colored men came to define citizenship for the nation as a whole. Yates authored the very first legal treatise on the rights of free black Americans. It was 1838 when Rights of Colored Men to Suffrage, Citizenship, and Trial by Jury was published in Philadelphia. He was not one of antebellum America's highly regarded legal minds. Some say he read law for a time, although there's no evidence that he was admitted to the bar. Instead, Yates's career began with a short-lived stint as a newspaper publisher in his hometown of Troy, New York. His bona fides on the subject of race and citizenship were best established during his years as an agent for the American Anti-Slavery Society. While many abolitionists maintained a self-conscious distance from free black communities, Yates centered his work there. The opposition of free people, the oppression of free people of color was a companion to slavery in Yates's view, with anti-slavery work necessarily extending into questions of free people's status. Penning Rights of Colored Men was the pinnacle of this mission. Yates placed a powerful instrument of authority in the hands of free African Americans and their allies. The antebellum legal treatise was a key tool in the standardization and dissemination of legal knowledge and was typically devoted to the comprehensive synthesis of a single branch of law. By the late 1830s, Yeats was following on the success of James Kent's commentaries and Joseph Story's treatise series. The genre had come to be associated with the concepts of law, excuse me, as scientific knowledge, legal education as systemic, and the profession as respectable. Yeats successfully adopted legal culture's own tool to such a degree that readers from the 19th century until today have regarded him as an authority on free black legal status. But Yeats's text was also a work of advocacy. Rights of colored men received prominent notices in the black and abolitionist press and could be purchased at local anti-slavery society offices. As a result, the work served as a probing legal treatise that fueled activist arguments. Yeats provides a window into the position that some activists, black and white, took on race and citizenship in the end of the 1830s. Law was an instrument of change, and Yeats forthrightly explained his objective: to undermine prejudice against color. Racism had led to legal disability, exclusion from militia service, naturalization, suffrage, public schooling, ownership of real property, office holding, and courtroom testimony. Yeats was especially unsettled by the disenfranchisement of free black men in New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, and more recently Pennsylvania. Assembling evidence from legal culture, he believed, would help establish the rights and citizenship of free black people. Yeats began with a story of the nation's origin. The establishment of the United States, he said, had been at the outset a revolutionary, Republican, and an enlightened undertaking that was untainted by racism or distinctions among and between races. This had been possible in the wake of the American Revolution because the founding generation knew firsthand the contributions black people had made to independence through military service and through labor. American law had originally been colorblind, as evidenced by the absence of racial distinctions in founding documents such as the federal and state constitutions. Change came in the early 19th century at the fault line between generations. A forgetting occurred, Yeats posited. Lawmakers of the early republic did not know how black people had contributed to the nation's founding and hence were entitled to the privileges and immunities of citizens. In this sense, Yeats's aim was partly to restore that past to the nation's political and legal memory. To achieve this, he compiled a history of lawmakers and their deliberations, in which he found the development of anti-black prejudice in courts, constitutional conventions, and legislatures. He followed the professional lives of men whose work included roles from low-level administrator to convention delegate and judge. Their ideas about free black people moved with them. Most powerful was Yeats's argument about how law, through suffering from amnesia, could be made right. The book, Birthright Citizens, A History of Race and Rights in Antebellum America.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Today we find out, right? Today we find out, voter suppression notwithstanding, whether America is going to continue down the autocratic road. And by the way, David Leonhardt has a brilliant piece in the New York Times today about how this happened in Hungary. Whether we continue down the autocratic road that not only Donald Trump, but in fact largely, I mean, this precedes Donald Trump. Mitch McConnell's been doing this for a long, long time. Whether we travel down this road toward plutocracy, autocracy, oligarchy, you know, kind of a combination of the three. That combination of the three back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, we called fascism. Whether we continue down that road or whether we slow it or whether we reverse it. And it's going to depend on whether you get out to the polls or whether you get your friends out to the polls, whether we all vote. I've voted. Have you? So, you know, today, we have one guest in the whole show today. He'll be on in about a half hour. He's with the DNC, and he's just going to give us an update on how everything's going around the country and what we can do. I did want to flag for you a couple of things. The first one is the phone number, which we're using this election, we've used in past elections. It's 866-OUR-VOTE, OURVOTE, 866-OUR-VOTE. And you call that only if you have a problem. That's the problem line, right? If you go in and your voting machine flips, for some reason we got reports from 4 states now that the voting machine, this is from early voting, I don't know, I'm assuming it's still continuing, that the voting machines are flipping votes. And, you know, it's not happening a lot, apparently, but is happening. And weirdly, every single report that I've seen, I don't, maybe you've seen others. I mean, I don't so much read right-wing media anymore these days. And so maybe the flip side is being reported on there. But it seems that it's always flipping Democratic votes into Republican votes. You know, you vote for Beto O'Rourke and it says, thank you for voting for Ted Cruz kind of thing, you know. And in fact, Texas is one of the states where we're getting these reports about electronic voting machines flipping votes. And they always, I mean, you know, this has been going on since 2002 when the Help America Vote Act, you know, gave billions of dollars to the states to buy voting machines from Republican-aligned companies like ES&S and Diebold. And it always seems to work to the benefit of the Republicans. If Republicans win, it's going to depend. I mean, you know, first of all, it's going to depend on turnout, obviously. But also, if they win, it's going to mean that their voter suppression efforts have been successful. This is a big deal. Greg Palast is writing about this over at Truthout. And in Greg's piece at Truthout today, he writes, this is specifically about Georgia. He says, purged voters' provisional ballots could decide the Georgia governor's race. Keep in mind, the last Georgia governor's race was won by about a little less than 200,000 votes. And Brian Kemp has purged at least, well, he's purged about 500,000 people from the voting rolls in Georgia. But Greg Palast's lawsuit and research found that 340,134 of them actually still live in Georgia. He tells the story, for example, of a guy by the name of Rahim Shabazz. And Rahim Shabazz said, I wanted to vote for Stacey Abrams, but I won't be able to vote in the November 6th election. Why? Because Brian Kemp had canceled his voter registration. The reason Kemp did it, he said, was because Shabazz had not voted in the previous 2 elections. And Shabazz says, hey, wait a minute. You have a constitutional right to vote, and you have a constitutional right not to vote, right? He says he didn't like the choices that were offered in the last 2 elections. He also says that the government has no trouble finding him to pay parking tickets or pay his taxes. You know, why won't they let him vote? And so anyhow, he discovered this by going on Greg Palast's site and plugging his name into the database, the Georgia Purge database, and boom, there he was. He had been purged by Brian Kemp. And so he contacted the Secretary of State's office and said, hey, wait a minute, you purged me, I want to vote. And they said, sorry, it's too late. Voter registration is closed. You have to wait 2 more years. And this is going to be the case with 340,000 Georgia voters. Now, if they show up to the polls, and probably many of them will, because they don't know that they've been purged. There's been no notice sent out to any of these people. When they show up at the polls, they'll be given a provisional ballot, which will not be counted on election night. And if it is counted at all, the person who decides whether provisional ballots get counted is, drum roll, Brian Kemp. The guy running for governor against Stacey Abrams, the guy who's also the Secretary of State, who's running the election in which he is a candidate. So, you know, keep your eyes out. I've got a bunch of stories here that we're going to dig into as we go through the show, but I'm declaring this an anything goes voting Tuesday here. You know, if there's anything on your mind you want to talk about that you can figure out any way to relate it to the elections or electoral politics, you know, feel free. I mean, it's not a day to discuss UFOs, certainly, but, you know, issues, what plays, what doesn't, what works, what doesn't, anything like that, you know, give us a shout. There was one thing, this is economics, and this doesn't have anything to do with voting, or maybe it does. In fact, maybe it's really at the core of it. Because this has to do, I think, with what's going to happen right after the election. We've been watching for 4 or 5 months now the worldwide economy cooling down. China's GDP has dropped to about 2%. You've got a bunch of countries in Europe that have already started to slide into recession. Russia's in recession. You know, this is happening all over the country. Russia came up with an alternative program to SWIFT. Now, SWIFT is the program, the international banking program that clears international transactions. But they have to be done in dollars for it to work, or euros. And so Russia's come up with an alternative to this program where you can clear things in rubles internationally. And China, they're working with China to create this alternative payment system. And Chuck Miller, who writes the Daily Pfennig for the Aden sisters, the Aden forecast, he says, I read a report last night that Russia's alternative payment to SWIFT has already gained quite a few users. When trading partners of Russia and eventually China too, as they will use this alternative payment system, use this system and bypass SWIFT, it means they'll no longer need dollars to settle the terms of their trade. These are baby steps to that outcome, folks, but it's happening right before your eyes. Do you see it? And then he writes, and now this. The good news for the U.S. just keeps rolling in. Now he's being sarcastic. I've told you about how central banks around the world have been backing away from their usual allotment of treasuries sold at the auction. Now, let me back away from Chuck for a moment. This is two things. Number one, the Republicans last year borrowed $1.5 trillion. It's a $5 trillion over 10 years. But just last year, it was $1.5 trillion that they borrowed to give to billionaires. And when the federal government borrows money, the way they borrow that money is they sell treasury bonds and bills into the public market and the international market. And if nobody buys those bills, nobody buys those debt instruments, those IOUs, if nobody gives the federal government the money so that they can hand it over to the billionaires as tax cuts, then the government has to offer higher interest rates to encourage people to buy the treasuries. You're following this? I mean, it's very simple stuff, right? Where the government says, hey, we're going to offer these, here's $1 trillion worth of bonds that will pay 2.3%. And the world says, we're not interested in 2.3%. We're not interested in your bonds. We don't need it right now. So the government says, well, how about 2.4%? Not yet. How about 2.5%? Okay, we'll take 2.5%. So that's how it works, right? So back to Chuck. He says, I've told you all about how central banks around the world have been backing away from their usual allotment of treasuries sold at auction. Well, yesterday we got the second worst bid to cover in 9 years of the auction of short-term treasuries. In other words, this goes back to the tail end of the recession when we did, we borrowed another $1 trillion. That was in 2009 or 2010, to fund the Recovery Act, to give money to billionaires and banks to bring the economy back. And he says, well, yesterday we had the second worst bid to cover in 9 years. Wait, what? Yes, the auction did not go off smoothly. He said, we've seen the yields rise, right? I mean, we're at 11-year highs on short rates, and the stock market is teetering. And all that isn't enough to attract more buyers at the auction? Uh-oh. And his point here is that, people want to invest their money. They want to make money with money. But they're not putting their money in the stock market right now because it's teetering, and they're not putting it in bonds. What the heck does that mean? That's a huge bad sign. So he says, apparently yields are going to have to rise much more. And we all know what that does to bond servicing costs. In other words, as yields rise, then the federal government has to pay more money, right? So, I mean, we're on course right now to be spending more on just paying interest on the national debt than we pay to the Pentagon. He says, this is scary to me, folks, and should be to you. And I'm not the boy who cried wolf. This is actually happening. And I absolutely agree with Chuck Miller. The Republican irresponsibility that we saw during the Bush administration and during the Trump administration, where Bush put 2 wars on the national credit card without paying for them and $1 trillion tax cut on the national credit card without paying for it. And then this, bled into the Obama presidency where he had to, that and Republican deregulation of the banking system brought about the great crash in 2008. And then Obama had to borrow another $1 trillion to get us out of that crash. And, we can still argue about how that should have been done, whether the money should have gone to people or whether it should have gone to banks and billionaires. But, it went to banks and billionaires. That's what it took to get Republicans in Congress to go along with something that would save the republic. So that's what they did. And here we are. And when the bottom starts to fall out in a way that's visible, because it's visible right now to a lot of us, the bottom is falling out. And it's going to become really obvious in the next 4 or 5 months. And when it does, guess what Donald Trump and the Republicans are going to say? It's because the Democrats just took the House and maybe the Senate. That's what they're going to say. And we've got to get ready for that. My answer, the Republicans say, Trump brought us this giant surge in the economy, and isn't that wonderful? And my answer is the same answer that I gave back in the 80s when Reagan did the same thing is, give me $1 trillion credit card, and I'll show you what it looks like to live large. but the bill's going to come due someday. And I don't mean that in the context of some, Republican debt fear-mongering hysteria. The reality is that the Republican two Santa Claus theory, they're trying to run up the debt so much that the Democrats are going to have to say, okay, we go along. We say, uncle, yes, cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid to pay for that interest on the debt, to pay down the debt so we don't have to pay so much interest. That's the Republican game plan. That's what they're betting on. And they are betting with the future of this country and the economy, and the people who get hurt are not the billionaires. They make money whether the market goes up or down. It's going to be average working people all across this country. They're going to get wiped out because of this Republican irresponsibility, which they will blame on the Democrats.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So get ready. We'll pick up your calls after the break. Welcome back. Glenn in Vancouver, Washington. Hey, Glenn, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind?
Good morning, Tom. Welcome back to town. My question is, since if everything goes as predicted and we win the House but not the Senate, then aren't we still under the 8 ball or behind the 8 ball? Because anything we pass will be appealed and or not taken up by the Supreme Court. And my question is, is there a possibility that if we finally win the Senate, that we can do an end run around the Supreme Court by passing laws that are not reviewable by the Supreme Court?
Yeah, it's technically possible. It may be, if it was something really, and it has been done in the past. Article 3, Section 2 says that the Supreme Court shall operate under regulations and exceptions defined by Congress. And Congress has passed legislation in the past. Phyllis Schlafly and I talked about this many times on the air before she died, that explicitly says this legislation is not subject to review by the Supreme Court. You can simply write that into a bill. But it's always been a very non-controversial thing. The last time was back in the 80s with a farm bill that Tom Daschle was putting forward, or maybe it was the 90s, but it was Tom Daschle when he was Senate Majority Leader when the Democrats controlled the Senate. But it was just a farm bill. So, yeah, that's possible. But the reality is that if we don't take the Senate, no legislation is going to pass because anything that comes out of the House will get stopped in the Senate. And even if we take the Senate, unless you can get 2/3 in both houses to override a presidential veto, the White House is still in Republican hands, and Trump will veto things that we do. But we can define a legislative agenda. The important thing here, I think, Glenn, is that this. We talked before about yesterday, in fact, and the day before, we talked with Tom Perez about this. The idea that. We could have a, quote, do-nothing Congress. That is, gridlock. The Democrats won't pass things, will pass things in the House that the Senate won't take up. The Senate will pass things that the House won't take up, and so nothing happens. And that's what happened in 46 and 47. Actually, it was the election of 46, 47 and 48, when Harry Truman was president, and the Republicans took the House for 2 years. That's exactly what happened. And Truman campaigned against them, against the do-nothing Congress, is what he called it, and won re-election, or won his, actual first election, but won his continuation of his presidency in the election of 1948. So, we're concerned about that. But on the other hand, I think that 1994 is actually more instructive. In 1994, this was a midterm election 2 years into Bill Clinton's presidency, and the House and Senate were both controlled by Democrats. Republicans won control of the House. This was Newt Gingrich's contract on America. And the result of that was that they started using their subpoena power to investigate the president. And over a 4-year period, that led directly to the impeachment of Bill Clinton and over a BJ. And this time, we've got real, serious, actual stuff. So I think that, I'm not so worried about the 1940, whatever the year was, the the 1946 scenario. I'm not as worried about that as I am with the 46 scenario, or the 48 scenario, ultimately, comparing it to 2020, as I am hopeful that what we're seeing is a reverse play of 1994. Glenn, thanks for the call. We'll be right back. Just had a fascinating call from Glenn, a caller in Vancouver, and asking about how things will probably play out if we take the House but not the Senate. And there are a couple of historical analogies, two big ones. There's a bad news one and a good news one. I'm just going to give you this little riff, and then I'll pick up your phone calls. The lines are slammed here. But the bad news one, as I mentioned yesterday or the day before, is the Harry Truman one. In the election of 1946, let's see, 52, 48. Yeah. In the election of 46, which would have been Harry Truman's first midterm election. So it's kind of analogous to right now with Donald Trump. The Democrats controlled the House and Senate. The Republicans took the House. Everything the Republicans passed, the democratically controlled Senate refused to go along with. Everything the democratically controlled Senate passed, the Republican-controlled House refused to go along with. And basically nothing happened for 2 years. And Truman ran for re-election in 48 on the, quote, do-nothing Congress. That was 90% of his campaign strategy, and he won re-election. So, you can imagine Donald Trump doing the exact same thing. So, and I think that that's very real, and that's probably going to be, a major component of this. But on the other hand, if you look at 1994, which was the first midterm election, Bill Clinton was elected in 92. 94 was the first midterm election, just like this is the first midterm election for Trump, just like that was the first midterm election for Truman. During the election, before the election, the Democrats controlled both the House and the Senate. They took the House. This was Newt Gingrich's contract on America. It was a brilliant marketing strategy that was used all across the country, even though it was a scam. His 10-point item, 5 or 6 of them just pointed to one single piece of legislation that was a tax cut for millionaires and billionaires. But he said it would do this and this and this and this and this. And so, he ran this scam, but people bought it. The Republicans took control of the House. And, yeah, you had that kind of gridlock, again, with a Republican House and Democratic Senate. But what was really consequential about that election was that once the Republicans took control of the committees so that they could hold hearings and use the subpoena, they began their investigations into Bill Clinton's Whitewater land deal, where he lost $35,000 back before he was governor of Arkansas. And then that went to the Rose Law Firm, and then that went to the Travelgate, and then that went to Kathleen Willey and what's her name, and forgetting the woman who actually started that whole thing. And then that went, and that led them to Monica Lewinsky, and boom, they could impeach the president for a BJ. And now we've got more than just Donald Trump chasing attractive young women around the White House. We have clear evidence that he enthusiastically colluded with a foreign government to help make him president. We have clear evidence that his businesses have been basically criminal enterprises for at least 20, 25 years. We have clear evidence that he is violating the Constitution's emolument clause. We have clear evidence that he has stocked his administration with some of the most corrupt officials in the history of the United States. The Teapot Dome scandal that almost brought down the Coolidge administration back in the 1920s was because Albert Fall, the Secretary of the Navy, had a financial interest in a gas drilling operation at Teapot Dome out in Wyoming. Virtually the entire administration was brought to its knees because one guy in the cabinet, the Secretary of the Navy, I'm not even sure he was in the cabinet, but one guy, was basically taking a bribe, in quotes. Well, Trump has done far worse than that. And Pruitt and Walker and all these guys in his administration, they've done far worse than that. So once the Democrats get the subpoena, look out.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Okay, end of rant. We'll pick up your calls right after the break. Today from Birthright Citizens, A History of Race and Rights in Antebellum America by Martha S. Jones. In the introduction, Rights of Colored Men Debating Citizenship in Antebellum America is the title of the introduction. The title of William Yates's 1838 treatise, Rights of Colored Men, aptly captures the subject of this book. The 19th century Americans for whom Yates wrote were fascinated by a juridical puzzle. Not slaves, nor aliens, nor the equals of free white men, who were former slaves and their descendants before the law. None were more interested in this question than black Americans themselves, and Birthright Citizens takes up their point of view to tell the history of race and rights in the antebellum United States. The pressures brought on by so-called black laws and colonization schemes, especially a radical strain, explain why free people of color feared their forced removal from the United States. In response, they claimed an unassailable belonging, one grounded in birthright citizenship. No legal text expressly provided for such, but their ideas anticipated the terms of the 14th Amendment. Set in Baltimore, a place between North, South, and the Atlantic world, this book traces the scenes and the debates through which black Americans developed ideas about citizenship and claims to the rights that citizens enjoyed. Along the way, they engaged with legislators, judges, and law's everyday administrators. From the local courthouse to the chambers of high courts, the rights of colored men came to define citizenship for the nation as a whole. Yates authored the very first legal treatise on the rights of free black Americans. It was 1838 when Rights of Colored Men to Suffrage, Citizenship, and Trial by Jury was published in Philadelphia. He was not one of antebellum America's highly regarded legal minds. Some say he read law for a time, although there's no evidence that he was admitted to the bar. Instead, Yates's career began with a short-lived stint as a newspaper publisher in his hometown of Troy, New York. His bona fides on the subject of race and citizenship were best established during his years as an agent for the American Anti-Slavery Society. While many abolitionists maintained a self-conscious distance from free black communities, Yates centered his work there. The opposition of free people, the oppression of free people of color was a companion to slavery in Yates's view, with anti-slavery work necessarily extending into questions of free people's status. Penning Rights of Colored Men was the pinnacle of this mission. Yates placed a powerful instrument of authority in the hands of free African Americans and their allies. The antebellum legal treatise was a key tool in the standardization and dissemination of legal knowledge and was typically devoted to the comprehensive synthesis of a single branch of law. By the late 1830s, Yates was following on the success of James Kent's commentaries and Joseph Story's treatise series. The genre had come to be associated with the concepts of law, as scientific knowledge, legal education as systemic, and the profession as respectable. Yates successfully adopted legal culture's own tool to such a degree that readers from the 19th century until today have regarded him as an authority on free black legal status. But Yates's text was also a work of advocacy. Rights of Colored Men received prominent notices in the black and abolitionist press and could be purchased at local anti-slavery society offices. As a result, the work served as a probing legal treatise that fueled activist arguments. Yates provides a window into the position that some activists, black and white, took on race and citizenship in the end of the 1830s. Law was an instrument of change, and Yates forthrightly explained his objective: to undermine prejudice against color. Racism had led to legal disability, exclusion from militia service, naturalization, suffrage, public schooling, ownership of real property, office holding, and courtroom testimony. Yates was especially unsettled by the disenfranchisement of free black men in New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, and more recently Pennsylvania. Assembling evidence from legal culture, he believed, would help establish the rights and citizenship of free black people. Yates began with a story of the nation's origin. The establishment of the United States, he said, had been at the outset a revolutionary, Republican, and an enlightened undertaking that was untainted by racism or distinctions among and between races. This had been possible in the wake of the American Revolution because the founding generation knew firsthand the contributions black people had made to independence through military service and through labor. American law had originally been colorblind, as evidenced by the absence of racial distinctions in founding documents such as the federal and state constitutions. Change came in the early 19th century at the fault line between generations. A forgetting occurred, Yates posited. Lawmakers of the early republic did not know how black people had contributed to the nation's founding and hence were entitled to the privileges and immunities of citizens. In this sense, Yates's aim was partly to restore that past to the nation's political and legal memory. To achieve this, he compiled a history of lawmakers and their deliberations, in which he found the development of anti-black prejudice in courts, constitutional conventions, and legislatures. He followed the professional lives of men whose work included roles from low-level administrator to convention delegate and judge. Their ideas about free black people moved with them. Most powerful was Yates's argument about how law, through suffering from amnesia, could be made right. The book, Birthright Citizens, A History of Race and Rights in Antebellum America.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Laura in Champaign, Illinois. Hey, Laura, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Last week, someone posted on Democratic Underground who was from Texas, and he said he voted a straight Democratic ticket, but before he left the voting booth, he checked his receipt and saw his vote for Beto had been flipped to Cruz.
Whoa.
So this is what election fraud is.
Yes.
So please, everyone, check your ballot before you walk out of the voting booth today.
Yeah. Amen. Thank you, Laura. Thank you for that. Rich in Calumet, Michigan. Hey, Rich, what's up?
Hey, well, good news first. Mm-hmm. I've never seen such a big line at the ballot office. We live in a very rural area. I'm up in Calumet, Michigan, which is a little arm that reaches up in the Keweenaw Peninsula,
mm-hmm.
up in the middle of Lake Superior. And, yeah, the line was going out the door. Usually when I get there, I get somewhere between 8 and 10. There's almost nobody there. And it was just packed. And people seem to be very cheery.
Oh, that's good news.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, there you go.
The other thing, when you were talking about the money situation a little bit earlier, I've been hearing on a lot of business reports that confidence in the dollar is dropping all over the world.
That's right. It's a combination of Trump's crazed trade policies. And just for the record, I support tariffs, but they have to be passed by Congress. You can't have presidents doing them by executive order, so they only last 2 years. Nobody's going to build a factory based in the United States based on that. So it's a combination of his incompetent, scrambled head trade policies and just the erratic way that this country is being governed right now, both by Trump and the Republican Party. And yeah, it concerns me tremendously, and I see a big disaster looming on the horizon.
Well, I know on the political reports, they say they basically say that the Republican Party is danger to the United States and to the economy of the world. And I was kind of shocked to hear that. And it was on 3 or 4 different stock market report programs, and I was just like, whoa.
People forget that in 2000, George W. Bush inherited a budget surplus from Bill Clinton that would have continued infinitely into the future if we had just left things where they were and not done a tax cut and 2 wars. And that budget surplus would have been so great that within 15 years, it would have paid off much of the national debt. I mean, it's like somehow that's just like vanished from our memory. Excuse me, Rich, you were saying.
Well, and the last thing to tell you, pot looks like it's going to pass on our ballot. And I've been growing for about 40 years and I've listened to your expert, and there was a couple times I tried to call in, but you really didn't have enough time to say you can sex from seeds. And I also know anything you ever need to know, I've learned, I guess, from trial and error and some of the best experts in the cannabis industry that have been around forever. A lot of these guys, I was involved with NORML for many, many years, and I got to know and travel around a lot of these guys. So if you ever need help with anything, please be free to holler. I'd love to give you a hand.
Thanks, Rich. Send me a note on that, would you? My email address is over on our website.
I did shoot you one email address a while back on how to get your CBD levels up without necessarily maturing your plant outdoors.
Yeah. Well, send me another note, and hopefully it'll get past my spam filter, and because that's good to know. By the way, how do you sex seeds?
If you look at the bottom of the seed and look at it with a magnifying glass, if it comes to a point, 99% of the time, that's a male. If it looks like looks like a little volcano almost. It has a cave in it, or a cove where it attaches to the plant. That's probably a female. And I kind of been tinkering with this for about 5 or 6 years now since I heard about it, and I'll be darned, it seems to be accurate.
It's sort of an analog to human genitalia, so it's easy to remember. That's fascinating. Yeah. Rich, thanks a lot for the call. I want to get some other people in here, but it's good to hear from you. Thank you. Brett in Moncks Corner, South Carolina. Hey, Brett, what's up?
Hi, how are you? I just wanted to let you know I've been watching some of your YouTube videos over the last 2 weeks. And I voted straight Republican in 2016, both for the Congress, Senate, and the presidency. And today I cast my ballot straight Democratic based on some stuff that's going on that I didn't like. I don't like all the income gains in the economy going to the top 1%, and they're the only ones that are benefiting from the stock market and all of that. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And the Republican Party is all about the rich and the corporations that make them rich. And the Democratic Party,
exactly.
Since certainly since the 1960s, but I think in a big way since the 1930s, the Democratic Party has been all about working people. And that's why it's such an uphill slog, is because the corporations and billionaires have all this money to put out, phony baloney advertising and fool people. So, Brett, I'm so glad to hear that you're
exactly
awakened.
That's exactly what they do. That's the only thing that they throw a couple of bones out to Americans every now and then. The Republicans here, they say stuff that people here like to hear just to get them to the polls to vote for their tax schemes and all that. And it's just going to come to a point when the top 1%, what happens when they control all the money and no one else has any left?
Yeah.
What happens then?
Well, what happens then is you have a crash. That's what happened in 1929. The 1929 was the previous point in economic history of the United States when inequality, the gap between the very rich and the very poor, was the greatest it had ever been in the history of the United States in 1929. And boom, the economy collapsed, because you just can't run an economy. I mean, what drives an economy is people buying things. It's called aggregate demand in economic language. That's literally the foundation of the economy. It's like 80% of everything that drives the economy is coming out of aggregate demand. And aggregate demand is not driven by billionaires buying new yachts, because they just can't buy enough yachts. It's compared to how many billions they've got. It's driven by average working people buying, sheets for their beds, or a new bed itself, or a washing machine, or a new car, or just a new pair of jeans. I mean, it wasn't Tom Steyer, but who's the guy?
Can I ask you another question?
Yeah, go ahead, Brett. Sorry.
But from 2008 to 2010, the Democrats did control the House, Senate, and the presidency. Right. How come they didn't pass single-payer health care at that point, but they passed Obamacare?
They had a 74-day window between the time that Ted Kennedy died and geez, I don't remember the events now, but it had to do with the death of Ted Kennedy and the election of that Republican guy, Scott, whatever his name was, from Massachusetts. They had a 74-day window where they actually had a veto-proof majority in the United States Senate. And during that time, they passed about 40 pieces of really significant legislation, including Obamacare. But once that window
Right.
closed, that was basically the first 4 months of Obama's presidency. And when that Scott guy in Massachusetts got into the Senate, they lost that majority, or they lost that veto-proof majority. And at that point, the Republicans blocked absolutely everything Obama tried to do for the rest of his presidency. So,
Yeah,
you know,
the last 6 years of it.
yeah, that's right. So it wasn't like the Democrats weren't trying. I mean, they passed some great legislation out of the House of Representatives, extending long-term unemployment insurance. The Republicans had cut it back down to 1 year. They took it back out to 2 years. Again, the Senate refused to consider it. You know, Mitch McConnell was, you know, I mean, that's what happened. It was total Republican obstruction, which is why the Republicans are screaming about Democratic obstruction, because they always scream about what they do, right? It's projection. So, yeah. Okay, Brett, thanks a lot for the call. It's nice to hear from you.
I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I hope you call again. Brett, thanks a lot for the call.
you.
Good talking with you. Galen in San Francisco. Hey, Galen, what's up?
Hi. Oh, excuse me. There we go. Had to take you off speaker. Sorry.
Thank you, Galen. What's up?
Well, I just wonder if you have any ideas about why, since the year 2000, the Democratic Party basically has done nothing about reforming our voting system. They haven't challenged, you know, or tried to get rid of the Electoral College. How many times has it defeated them now?
That would require a constitutional amendment. There have been a lot of efforts to do that,
no, they're
Galen.
doing it state by state, but I'm saying there's a way to do it. But the Democratic Party hasn't challenged it, and that's what I don't understand.
I don't know if that's part of their, if that was part of their last platform or not. But I know that reforming our voting systems has been consistently on the Democratic platform. The Democrats have not had enough of a majority. They have not had enough power to be able to actually pass a constitutional amendment. So
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, Tom, to interrupt you, but I'm just looking at all the different things: the paper ballots, the machines, everything that Greg Palast has talked about.
Yeah.
We've known about all this time, and they don't. I get surveys from the Democratic Party, and they never ask the question.
Then, Galen, take some responsibility for this. Contact your representatives and absolutely give them hell. Show up at your local Democratic Party meeting and say, this is my #1 issue and the #1 issue for a lot of people, and we're not going to take this anymore. But don't sit around and whine and complain about it or even encourage people not to vote.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
This is actually all the more reason to put Democrats in charge, because the Democratic Party is really the only party that has an interest in this issue. And welcome back. Jesse in Miami watched us on Free Speech TV. Hey, Jesse, what's up?
Hey, hi, Tom. Hey, this got to be one of the biggest elections since, I guess, the Civil War got started.
I think so.
So, yeah, I mean, we just had the two worst candidates in history, so now we're getting a referendum on the worst one. So you got to expect this guy's going to lose.
Well, I wouldn't call Hillary Clinton one of the worst candidates in history, although I think that her campaign was not well run. But, we can disagree on that, Jesse. Continue your point, please.
Okay, well, the point is that this is the most important election. We know the president is going to cut short the funds for security of the elections. Is there any grassroots effort to monitor who counts the votes? I haven't heard nothing.
Yeah, I know that there are election integrity groups around the country, and but none of them have kind of bubbled up as a major one, or the one that has the highest profile, or that has the biggest. And frankly, I think there's a huge opportunity here for somebody who wants to get involved in politics and institutionally, create an institution that's going to do this. If there is a group out there that anybody listening right now knows about, give me a call and let us know about it. The 866-hour vote, that I need to look up which group is running that, because that's a voter integrity group. So they're doing some pretty good work. In fact, let me find out right now, Jesse, as we're talking, because this is an issue. 866-OUR-VOTE, and let's see what comes up. I should have known this, right? It's the Election Protection Group. I think they just call themselves Our Vote, and they have lawyers. Several of our lawyers are in court right now in connection with emergency relief against Brian Kemp. Yeah, it's called Election Protection. It's based in Washington, D.C. They've got a Facebook page, 866 Our Vote. So it looks like that's the number one group right now. So Election Protection, you can Google it, or I wouldn't call them, because they're asking people only to call if they've got a problem voting right now, because they've got lawyers all over the country. Say what, Jesse?
Can I make a comment on the central banks?
Go for it.
I've seen a comment this morning saying who's going to bail out the central banks. I think China done answered that question. They say they print money to eliminate poverty. We over here, we print money to increase poverty. So who's going to bail out the central banks? It's a concept. That's what I would say.
It's a very good question, Jesse, and I don't know the answer to it. The central banks bailed out the commercial banks in 2008 and 9 and 10.
Yeah.
And, when Bernie and Ron Paul got their audit of the Fed, they audited it for the year 2008, I think. It might have been 2009, but I'm pretty sure it was 2008, Bush's last year. And it was, $23 trillion, am I remembering right, that they gave not just to Americans. I mean, Deutsche Bank got a big chunk of that. They gave that to actual individual billionaires. They gave it to big banks. Am I remembering correctly,
Yep.
Jesse? You're on top of this stuff.
Hey, Tom, that's we got to be on top of it, because we need to bail out ourselves and Mother Nature.
Yeah, you're right. Jesse, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be back. Michael Blake is going to be with us in the DNC. Stick around. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. It's 49 minutes, 15 seconds past the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us is the vice chair of the DNC, Michael Blake. He is also a New York State assemblyman from District 79 in New York State. Democrats.org is the website, and you can tweet him at Mr. MR Mike Blake. Michael Blake, welcome to the program.
Great to be with you. Happy
welcome
Election
back.
Day.
Thank you. Yeah, happy Election Day. So what's the news? And obviously, get out and vote right now. But beyond that, what's going on?
I mean, you could probably play that over and over again for everyly.
Yeah, I'm doing it all day. Trust me.
we feel good. I mean, there's no lie. I was with President Obama for close to 7 years. I was in Iowa for 08. I was in the general election 08. I was in 12. What I've seen across the country, not just today, where I'm in Illinois right now before I fly back home to New York. I was campaigning with Lauren Underwood, who we feel very confident will be elected to Congress tonight. We were in Milwaukee yesterday, campaigning for Tony Evers and Mandela Barnes. Early voting has just been historic turnouts everywhere. We feel very confident that by the end of tonight, not only we're going to get the House back, I feel very confident about the Senate. I feel there's going to be a lot of flips when it comes to governor races and state legislative races. Because people are really clear that they're ready to vote for something, not just against something.
Yeah. We now know that 340,123 people, or 132 people, I guess it is, in the state of Georgia were removed from the voting rolls by Brian Kemp in the last year, who still live in the state, who have not moved. This has been confirmed through a federal lawsuit and through one of the nation's top direct marketing companies that looked at the list after Brian Kemp had to give it up in that lawsuit from BBC reporter Greg Palast. And then, so those people, they don't even know they've been purged. They're going to show up at the polls and be given a provisional ballot. And the guy who decides whether provisional ballots are counted is, guess who? Brian Kemp. What do we do about this?
Well, we got to win. Make sure Stacey wins today.
Right. I mean, we got to obviously we got to turn out more than 400,000 additional people. I'm totally with you on that. But I mean, there should be hell to pay. The Supreme Court last year or this year said that Ohio's doing the same thing. Said it's just fine, Ohio, keep doing it. And now you've got 12 Republican states that are aggressively doing this, and 20 that are looking at it.
So I think there's multiple pieces to this. So one, we are ready everywhere when it comes to voter protection and clarifying questions for people that are going around the country. So if and when you show up And if you have any questions, you can do two different things, or three different things, rather. IWillVote.com is a website we created so that you can find out exactly where to go vote and what information you need when you go vote. If you have questions, you can text the word question to 43367. Again, text the word question to 43367, or call 833-336-8683. Again, 833-336-8683. If we're prepared for that. But equally, Tom, what we got to tell folks is, on a day like today, we have to overperform on our turnout because of the absolute discriminatory policies that are happening. You know, I was in Ohio a few weeks ago campaigning with Kathleen Clyde, who's running for Secretary of State, Rob Richardson for Treasurer. You know, about 1 million people being taken off the list in Ohio. Just, it is unconscionable what the Republicans are doing, and it is absolutely apparent that we have to overperform, but also be protecting with lawyers who are standing ready across the country.
Yeah. Over at Daily Kos, they're reporting in Detroit, early voters were turned away due to missing voting machines. No idea if those voters will have a chance to return and vote. In Indiana, the voting machines were not plugged in. There was only one volunteer. In Arizona, 3 polling places are currently down. The building was foreclosed overnight. In Gwinnett County, 3 different precincts now have been forced to use paper ballots because their technical problems have shut things down, which is leading to hundreds of voters stuck in line for hours. Elsewhere in Atlanta, quote, hundreds of voters stand in line for hours this morning at the Southwest Atlanta polling place. Only 3 voting machines for thousands of people. And some New York City precincts are suffering from broken scanners and other technical problems. The one thing that's in common with all of these, they're all in minority areas. What the hell is going on in this country?
There's no question about it. Look, I'm on the ballot today, and we feel confident we'll get reelected as well. But even in our district, we had scanners that were down. Multiple parts throughout the Bronx. They'd immediately send lawyers and teams out to that. There was one site in the northern part of the Bronx where 7 out of the 8 machines were not working. I mean, it is, again, absurd and ridiculous. There is no coincidence around this. This is a tactical, aggressive approach that is happening of trying to go after people of color across this country. And so the only way that you turn this around is by winning and putting people in these seats. For Secretary of State, especially for state legislators, for governor seats, all these different aspects, in order for us to right the wrongs of what we're seeing. You think about in Florida, where we've seen the nonsense of the last few weeks, and what we are very confident about Andrew Gillum and Bill Nelson up and down the ticket. But also, you think about in Florida, we're talking about rights being restored and the opportunity on today. They have an Amendment 4. There's 60% of people vote in favor of it. You know, more than 1 million people that are formerly incarcerated will get their rights restored in Florida. You know, there's an opportunity to change the game, and so we cannot allow the fear that is happening from the Republican side to prevail.
Yeah, amen. I can tell you that if 20 democratically controlled states had made it very difficult for white middle and upper middle class voters to vote, through a whole variety of systemic things like, you know, making sure that the crappiest voting machines and the smallest numbers were in their districts, knocking them off the voting rolls, you know, because of their last names, all these kind of things, that the Republicans would be, they'd be burning down the Capitol building right now. I mean, they would be out in the streets with torches. They would be screaming and yelling to high heaven, and they would be on the nightly news every single night. I sure hope, sir, as number 2 guy in the Democratic Party, that you can light a fire under your colleagues. This not only would be good politics, frankly, and I remember back 13 years ago sitting in a meeting with 7 Democratic senators where we brought up this issue, a couple of talk show hosts, me and Randy Rhodes and a couple of other people, and we were told explicitly by a Democratic senator speaking on behalf of the group, we're not going to talk about that because it causes people to think that their vote won't be counted, so we don't want to make this a public issue. We're going to try and fight this in the background. And nothing happened. And it's been 12, 13 years since I had that conversation with those senators. And you know, we just need to torch this thing. I mean, we need to light it on fire, sir.
Well, we've been very clear. You know, I'm doing media all day across the country to convey that we're not going to sit silent. We're going to push back. We're going to fight back. And we're going to promote IWillVote.com. We're going to win tonight. But in the midst of that winning, it's about standing up and saying we're going to protect people's rights.
And it's about turnout. I mean, you know, you've got the Secretary of State in Colorado running for re-election, and he just purged 500,000 people off the voting rolls in Colorado. So we've got to overperform, which means if you're thinking about voting, vote! So, Michael Blake, DNC Vice Chair. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Take care.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
From UN headquarters in
Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, you know, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. People who support our program there get, you know, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to patreon.com/Thom Hartmann and check out what we're doing and support our program. Thank you. Today we're reading from the Constitution Today by Akil Reed Amar. This is from it's a collection of essays. This is from his essays on the judiciary. This was originally published on Fine Law in 2002. It's titled More on Unfree Speech. The Supreme Court prohibits network television cameras and radio microphones from its public oral arguments. Transcripts of the back and forth between attorneys and the justices are not posted on the court's website until weeks have passed and the public's interest has waned. Members of the public may not even take notes in the gallery about what is being said in open court. Meanwhile, in its opinions, the court trumpets the importance of free speech and a free press. On the topic of free expression, why doesn't the Supreme Court practice what it preaches? That was the question Steve Calabrese and I recently posed in an op-ed in the New York Times, marking the opening of the Supreme Court's term earlier this month. Here I'll expand on the court's reluctance to welcome the First Amendment into its own courtroom. The First Amendment is the darling of the current court. Though sharply divided on many other issues, justices across the spectrum agree that free expression rights should be construed broadly. But the court's love affair with that First Amendment is a relatively modern development. Less than a decade after the adoption of the Bill of Rights, circuit-riding justices enthusiastically enforced a 1798 sedition law that made it a federal offense to criticize the president. Early in the 20th century, the court upheld punishment of a newspaper publisher for editorializing against state judges. During World War I, the justices sent Eugene Debs, a notable presidential candidate, to prison for peacefully criticizing the government. Indeed, before 1925, the court had never, not once, used free expression principles to invalidate government censorship, even as it routinely construed property rights broadly to invalidate economic regulation. Today's justices have repudiated this regressive legacy, but the residue of the early court's indifference to free expression remains visible in the court building itself, as the aforementioned rules and practices indicate. Perhaps these court rules and practices do not literally abridge freedom of speech or of the press, but if not, they sure come close. After all, the apparent purpose of these rules is precisely to limit free expression and free thought. Consider the rule against note-taking. A person in the courtroom can clean his wallet, or twiddle his thumbs, or tug his earlobe, or engage in countless other mindless activities, but is prohibited from engaging in the cognitive and expressive activity of writing down what he hears the justices saying, along with his own comments or questions or criticisms. Consider also the rule against the media's cameras. The court's rules do not bar security cameras in the courtroom, and such cameras may well be in the room for all we know. What the justices are banning is thus not cameras per se, but network television cameras, cameras that might broadcast information about the court to the American public. The harms that these rules seek to prevent are harms that pivot on the acts of thought and expression themselves. And these are the very sorts of harms the government typically may not seek to prevent under the Supreme Court's standard First Amendment case law. To put the point another way, no Supreme Court rule bars carrying a pencil into the courtroom or wearing a chopstick in one's hairdo. The ban is not based on security concerns, but is rather directly aimed at expressive activity per se, using one's pencil to take notes. More generally, one of the core purposes of the First Amendment is to protect a robust and timely public discourse about government officials and government decision-making, including, of course, judicial officials and judicial officials' decisions. But that discourse is precisely what is dampened by the court's own rule about its own building. This is especially so because the day of oral argument is one of the 2 days, the other being when the final Supreme Court decision is announced, that the American public and the American media are most likely to focus on a given legal case. If discourse that day is dampened, the public has lost a unique and irreplaceable occasion for democratic discussion and deliberation. When it comes to other government arenas, post offices, airports, school grounds, and so on, the court has typically insisted that such forums allow as much speech as is functionally compatible with the basic purpose of the arena. Yet in its own building, the court represses expressive activity without any strong showing of incompatibility or disruption. There is a word for this, and it is spelled hypocrisy, hypocrisy. The court's transcript policies are also unfree in another sense. In the days after oral argument, the transcripts are anything but free. The court gives a temporary monopoly to a private company, which in turn charges high fees for transcripts. The court would never, nowadays at least, give a private company a monopoly over its written opinions. Why should its oral arguments be treated any differently? There's nothing secret or confidential about oral arguments. Unlike judicial conferences where justices deliberate privately among themselves, oral arguments take place in open court. They are public events conducted by public servants with public money. The public deserves full access. To recast the point in the language of federalism, Americans outside the Beltway deserve electronic access comparable to the ability of those who live in Washington, D.C., Virginia, and Maryland to attend arguments in person. If television cameras are not acceptable, at a minimum, the arguments should be carried live on public radio, as happened in December 2000 for Bush v. Gore, and transcripts should be freely available immediately. The book is The Constitution Today by Akil Reed Amar.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. I don't know if you've seen this this little video clip. I can't play the video of it, but I can play the audio. I just saw it on John Aravotzis, who I follow. I'll retweet it as soon as I'm done. It's Triumph the Insult Dog. He's a puppet, a hand puppet. And Ted Cruz decides, oh, it'll be cool to talk to this guy. And so here's the conversation. This is hysterical.
And just remember, it wasn't the Republicans, it was the Democrats that took you into the vet to get fixed.
And there is freedom on the other side.
I support spaying. I support spaying and neutering, just like Trump did to you.
I I support Spain and neutering, just like Trump did to you. Right. Okay. It's election day. There's a lot going on, as you know, as we've been talking about in the last hour, you know, is this election a 1994 election or a 1946 election? How is this going to play out? What are the consequences of it going to be if the Democrats take the House and not the Senate? There's been several kind of hand-wringing articles over at Daily Beast and in other places. You almost wonder if they're attempts to suppress the Democratic vote, because they're saying, oh, it'll be a terrible thing if the Democrats take the House, because then nothing will get done. The Democrats will pass bills that the Senate won't take, and the Senate will pass bills that the House won't take, and Trump will veto anything that they agree on, and it's just, and he's going to, just like Harry Truman, he's going to run on the do-nothing Congress, and he's going to win. And yeah, you could draw some parallels, I suppose, to the 1946 election where Harry Truman, it was his first midterm election. He lost control of the House to the Republicans for 2 years. He did run against Congress being unable to pass a single piece of consequential legislation in those 2 years because of the split. And he did win, you know, re-election. But I think, frankly, this election is much more like 1994. In 1992, Bill Clinton became president. 2 years later was his first midterm election, just like this is Trump's first midterm election. The Democrats controlled both the House and the Senate in 1994. Newt Gingrich came in with a huge media. I mean, you know, Newt Gingrich worked the media the same way Donald Trump does, which is why they're such good buddies and they collaborate on campaign strategy. Newt Gingrich came in with this huge nationwide media campaign for his contract on America. I think he called it a contract with America, but whatever. I prefer to call it a contract on America. And it listed 10 really cool sounding things. You know, pay down the national debt, get more, you know, raise wages for workers, bring more jobs back to America, strengthen the average middle class family, raise the standard of living for the middle class. I don't remember all 10 points, but it was this, you know, who could disagree with these things, right? But 6 out of those 10, when you point to, you know, when you went to the legislation that Gingrich said would accomplish these goals, 6 out of those 10 things was tax cuts for billionaires and big corporations. But that was 1994. I mean, the internet wasn't really it was just kind of rolling. You know, back then it was CompuServe and AOL more than anything else. And in fact, I was running forums on CompuServe back then and making a good living doing it. And so, you know, people didn't realize what a scam Newt Gingrich was running. And so they elected the Republicans to control the House. And it was not a repeat of the Harry Truman election. Instead, when the Republicans got the power of subpoena, they began investigating Bill Clinton. They started with a land deal that he'd lost $35,000 on back before he was governor of Arkansas, that had gone south, and they thought there was some shenanigans there. They spent about 2 years on that. They couldn't find any dirt. Then they went to the Rose Law Firm. Then they went to Travelgate. Hillary Clinton had fired the people in the travel agency in the White House, which is absolutely her right. I mean, new administrations typically do that. They turn over everybody. It just took them a year or so to get around to it, the Clinton administration. And, you know, they replaced the travel people. Well, that was a scandal. And but they couldn't find anything there. It was totally normal. In fact, Hillary didn't really have anything to do with it. It was, you know, just an administrative thing. So then they went after Hillary Clinton. You know, well, she had to be up to no good when she was a lawyer with the Rose Law Firm, right? Back before Bill was governor and all that kind of. So we need to see all those documents. And for months, you know, nobody could find the documents, right? The Rose Law Firm was looking all over. And then they found the documents. And then the Republicans, of course, spent months going through them, you know, in Congress. And, oh, look at this and look at that. But there was nothing to look at, right? Everything she did was just like good stuff. And so they were like, well, what do we do now? And then, you know, along came Kathleen Willey and a couple of other women accusing that they'd had affairs with Bill Clinton and or that he had groped them or whatever. And now they're off to the races again, right? And they hire Ken Starr and they give him a $74 million budget. And he finds out ultimately that Bill got a BJ, you know, with Monica. I mean, you know, this is just. And they impeached him for that, right? They successfully impeached him in the House of Representatives. They ground the country to a halt for a year, basically. And they were one vote. Actually, maybe they were more than one vote short of impeaching him in the Senate. But in any case, the Senate failed to remove him from office over a BJ. Well, over lying about a BJ, to be precise. But, you know, kind of what's the difference? Here you got Donald Trump lying about having sex with, you know, 2 different women. Right? Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels. And there's another 20 women, I believe. In fact, I think the number is larger than 20, who are out and accusing him of actually sexually assaulting them as opposed to simply seducing them or having affairs with them. And he paid to cover up the McDougal and the Daniels one, if you want to go down the sex road. Or you've got Donald Trump openly conspiring. We know this. It's in the public record. It's been admitted. And by the way, he trying to conspire with the Russians to rig the elections, or to release Hillary Clinton's emails in a way that would influence the elections. And it looks like there was collaboration there. I mean, there's a brilliant piece over at, I think it's in the New York Times, the case for collaboration, or collusion rather. I went through this yesterday, the day before here on this program. It's solid. I mean, we don't even need Robert Mueller to tell us that Donald Trump conspired with a foreign power to become president of the United States, which, under normal circumstances would be considered treason. And certainly if a Democrat had done that, if Obama had done that, the Republicans would definitely call it treason. So I think that what we're looking at is a repeat if we only take the House. Now, if you get out and vote, we might take the Senate too. And if you can get 5 people to get out and vote, we might take the Senate too. But if we only take the House, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a really good thing, because I think we're going to see a repeat of 1994. We're going to start investigating the corruption of Tom Price, the corruption of Scott Pruitt, the corruption of what's his name, Walker, the guy who's took Pruitt's place at EPA, the corruption of Ryan Zinke, the corruption of Betsy DeVos, the corruption of Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary, who is so bizarrely corrupt. It's so transparently obvious. The corruption of Donald Trump, the fact that this guy is a grifter who's been running basically a RICO operation, a criminal operation, and calling it a business for at least 20 years. Since he got wiped out, bankrupt, and started going to foreign countries for money. He's been running basically money laundering schemes and scams. In fact, he's been he's got a bunch of people who are suing him under a civil RICO charge. We have a criminal in the White House. And when the Democrats have the power of subpoena, that will become obvious to everybody. I mean, it should be obvious to everybody right now, but of course, if you watch Fox News, none of this even gets discussed. If you listen to Right Wing Hate Radio, none of this even gets discussed. And there's a small group of people, maybe 20, 30% of Americans, who get most of their news from those sources, sadly, and they really don't know what's going on. They really don't know who this guy is and how badly he's screwing them. But with enough publicity, congressional hearings, will produce that kind of publicity. And with enough publicity, this could be a repeat of 94, which led to basically the Trump presidency. This is when the Republicans began to take over Congress by taking down Bill Clinton. I think that only this time we actually have substance. We actually have real crimes, not just, lying about sex. This is real stuff. Anyhow, we'll pick up your calls after the break. It's 15 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We're doing a kind of election day, anything goes Tuesday. I've got a bunch of other election news for you, what's on the ballot, where, and what's going on. We'll keep you up to date on that, too. And welcome back. Jennifer in Riverside, California, listening on KPFK. Hey, Jennifer, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thank you for taking my call. I wanted to express my appreciation for your previous caller, Brett, who voted in 2016 straight Republican, and this year is voting straight Democrat. Thank you for having an open mind. And I wanted to propose that, like you said, Republicans look out only for the rich, Democrats look out for the people, but there's a group we consistently overlook, and that's the unborn. And I'd like to propose that the Democrats would be unstoppable if only they would include that group. They protect people of color, they protect LGBT, women, but we leave them out.
Yeah. So, Jennifer, do you want to criminalize abortion, is what you're saying?
No, I don't think that's the right answer, but I think the Democrats are the ones putting policies in place that enable people and women to have children, to raise children, health care for all, education, a living wage. To me, it's the height of hypocrisy that Republicans want to, criminalize abortion, and yet it's like, oh, once you're born, you're on your own. It's survival of the fittest.
Well, it's not just that, Jennifer. I mean, the mantra during the Clinton administration was that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. And in fact, when you look at abortion statistics, what you find is that when Democratic programs are put into place that give women widespread access to birth control and give them widespread access to gynecological exams, basically basic women's health stuff, and what's it called, prenatal care, for pregnant women, that the abortion rates drop. I mean, they just plummet. Right? It's the most effective deterrent to abortion. Whereas when you have Republican policies that block women from access to birth control and that block women from access to prenatal care and even pre-pregnancy, just regular women's health care, then abortion rates skyrocket. And even including illegal abortions. So if you're concerned about abortion, I don't think that the answer is criminalizing it, because that, you're never going to stop abortion.
And I don't either, but I think that if we changed our rhetoric a little bit, we could win over a lot more voters, just like Brett, even though he did it for economic reasons. But many, many people vote Republican, single issue abortion. And I think if we courted those people and said, look, we're putting these policies in place so that people don't have to make that tough choice, we would be unstoppable.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that that's the reasonable and rational way to approach the abortion issue, is to say we want to make abortions as rare as possible. Because not because we want to lord over women, but because it's one of the most difficult choices any woman will ever make in her life. Republican grandstanding saying that women use it as birth control notwithstanding, all of the evidence indicates that that's simply not the case. There may be a very, very small number of women who have multiple abortions. They are typically mentally ill, literally. The vast majority of women who have abortions go through an agonizing decision to do it, and we should make birth control should be available and women's health should be available widely. Jennifer, thank you for the call. I shouldn't say the vast majority of women who get abortions, it's agonizing. Probably, certainly the majority. For some women it's easier, but again, it's these are not people who routinely do it as birth control. Nobody's using birth control, abortion as birth control. It's just a silly argument. We'll be right back. It's 20 minutes past the hour. Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann, people who support our program there get, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to patreon.com/Thom Hartmann and check out what we're doing and support our program. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Just did a live read for Harrys.com and with the promo code Tom. It's a great product. Anyhow, welcome back to the program. Just a couple quick things here about the election. I'm going to get to David Leonhardt's piece, What We Have to Fear, in today's New York Times. If you haven't read it, you really need to. 340,134 Georgians Brian Kemp has purged from the voting rolls who still live in Georgia. Greg Palast has nailed this, completely nailed this. some of the stuff that's on the polls right now, or on the ballots right now, this is all good government stuff. In Colorado, you've got amendments Y and Z, and in Michigan, it's proposal 2. In each case, they give voters the option of creating independent citizens commissions to draw districts. This is blowing up gerrymandering. In Missouri, it's Amendment 1 to create a nonpartisan demographer position to draw districts. In Utah, it's Proposition 4 to create a Citizens Advisory Commission. This is the people saying we've had it with gerrymandering. In California, voters in the city of Long Beach, this is Measure DDD, and Santa Barbara County, Measures G and H, can create independent citizen redistricting commissions to redraw Long Beach City Council and Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors districts. And the LA Times has endorsed the Long Beach Measure DDD. So, you know, that's some of the stuff going on. In the last hour, I went off on a long rant about what's going on with the economy right now and how Trump is going to play this like a fiddle. I think I'll wait until probably the next hour to repeat that. And there's a new operation, or a new, article about this new operation by business lobbyists and Republican operatives plotting to take down Democratic socialists. It's over at theintercept.com. Republican operatives and representatives from America's largest business groups alarmed at a wave, this is Lee Fong, alarmed at a wave of upset electoral victories by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and other avowed Democratic socialist candidates have been plotting to stem the tide of left-wing Democrats sweeping the country. Wynn is the name of this guy. Ironically, where's his first name? Andrew Wynn. He's an official with the Republican State Leadership Council. He says that the defeated incumbent in the Ocasio-Cortez race, Joe Crowley, was a moderate Democrat and former chair of the business-friendly New Democrat Coalition. He said he was someone who the business community could have a conversation with. On the other hand, Wynn warned Ocasio-Cortez would not be so receptive to business lobbyists. This was a call with including lobbyists from state chambers of commerce in Texas, Kentucky, New York, Georgia, and Maryland. They are putting this thing together. They've got this thing called the Free Enterprise Fund. It's a dark money group. And they've got another group that's organized. This is the Republican State Leadership Committee. It's a 527, similar to a super PAC, no disclosures. They say Koch Industries, Crown Core Concealed, Genentech Inc., ExxonMobil, Next Era Energy, Range Resources, Eli Lilly, Marathon Petroleum, Reynolds American, Boeing, General Motors, and Astellas Pharma are among the companies that have already provided $100,000, at least $100,000 to the committee. Gee, General Motors. Wow. I'm glad I ended up not buying that Chevy Volt. They go on to say the ABC Free Enterprise Group, a dark money affiliate, is kicking in money. They represent non-union construction companies. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce has given $1.7 million. They don't disclose their donors, but in the past, they've been heavily funded by Goldman Sachs and Dow Chemical, among other major foreign countries. The Republican State Leadership Committee additionally provides, quote, intelligence sharing. One example of this was help for Republicans to counter the waves of teacher union protests in West Virginia, Oklahoma, and other states. Quote, we're able to identify similar slogans, similar organizing principles, and help protect the business community and their allies in the legislature, says Andrew Wynn of the Republican State Leadership Committee. The Republicans are just right up front about how we're all in favor of business, to hell with the average working person. Yeah, I keep scratching my head every time I hear Stephanie Ruhle say, deregulation helped the economy. No, it didn't. It poisoned the air and water, and it increased the profits over at Koch Industries and a few other companies, but it did not help the economy. And somebody needs to set these people on MSNBC straight. This is crazy. If you have problems voting, the number is 866-HOUR-VOTE. That's election protection, 866-HOUR-VOTE. And, you know, there's all kinds of groups out there that are working with us to do this. In Georgia, it's going to come down to the purged voters, the 340,000 voters. Greg Palast points out that the National Voter Registration Act, which I just tweeted about this, in 1993 says the right of citizens of the United States to vote is a fundamental right. It is the duty of federal, state, and local governments to promote the exercise of that right. In other words, all over the country in Republican districts, in districts that Republicans control but are majority minority districts, or just have large minority populations, or even large urban populations, or large college student populations, the Republicans are making it harder and harder and harder to vote. They're purging people off the voting rolls. They're providing broken voting machines, or a very small number of voting machines. Whenever you see a line that's more than 30 minutes long to vote, you know that it's not in an upscale white Republican suburb. It will always be in a Democratic district, typically in one low-income, minority, or college students. Yeah, this is a truism. It has been the case for 20 years, and the Democratic Party needs to get their act together and absolutely raise holy hell about this. As I talked about with, what's his name, Michael Blake, the vice chair of the DNC in the last hour, said, you guys, it's time to raise hell. It's time to, to storm the barricades. It's time, this is taking the Bastille, right? I mean, it's time for Democrats to stand up and be counted. And that means you. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll pick up your calls right after the break. It's 27 minutes past the hour. Reading today from Justin Frank, Dr. Justin Frank's book, Trump on the Couch, Inside the Mind of the President. He's the guy who wrote Bush on the Couch and Obama on the Couch. He's a psychiatrist and professor of psychiatry in Georgetown in Washington, D.C. And the book just came out. This is from the introduction. There's no question that Trump is mentally unfit in ways that make him psychologically unsuited for the presidency. That in itself is a truly alarming turn of events. And I'd write the entire book in all caps if I thought that would better convey the sense of urgency with which it is written and should be read. Any number of troubling mental illness diagnoses and character evaluations can be and have been accurately applied to Trump. Both can vary from analyst to analyst, however, without necessarily sacrificing any of the accuracy. More to the point, the true value of a diagnosis is to determine an appropriate course of treatment, and there's no indication that any sort of treatment is a viable option. Trump on the Couch then seeks not simply to make the case that Trump is not well, but rather to show how he is unwell in ways that would have been of particular interest to the applied psychoanalysts whose investigation likely preceded our own, the Russians, and perhaps even their American allies or counterparts, who in the long tradition of intelligence gathering examined Trump's psyche and found an opportunity for exploitation. Trump's presidency caps a lifetime of dysfunction and disorder that is not likely to be healed while he is in office, just as Trump's ascendancy among voters gives expression to long-standing trends in the American electorate's psyche that are not going to be easily addressed. However, if we can identify certain aspects of these disorders and trends that may have contributed to Trump and his voters fusing into a shared belief system, then we have a better chance of fostering the kind of honest cultural discussion that will be necessary in order to contain and repair the damage that has already been done. Understanding Trump calls for a consideration of his psychodynamics almost certainly more rigorous than he has ever embarked upon on his own. Trump dismissed psychotherapy as a crutch in his 2004 Playboy interview. Years later, talking to biographer Michael D'Antonio, he described in greater detail a generalized aversion to introspection beyond the therapeutic setting. Quote, "I don't like to analyze myself because I might not like what I see," he told D'Antonio. "I don't like to analyze myself. I don't like to think too much about the past." End of quote. Even armed with a detailed family history, we can't capture Trump in action with only the tools of applied psychoanalysis. Like some of the most disturbed patients I've worked with, Trump is so erratic, constantly changing the topic, elevating the stakes, and raising the volume, that one doesn't know what to expect from him next. It's hard to imagine him in treatment. Even as the subject of an applied psychoanalytical investigation, he behaves like a patient who is simultaneously banging in the consulting room window, rattling on his door, ringing the phone, and texting or tweeting his demands for attention. Trump presents so many troubling affects that it's hard to remember them all. In the final weeks of the first year of Trump's presidency, Michael Wolff and David K. Johnston published accounts of the Trump White House that present a president with a startling number of disturbing characteristics. Any one of these demonstrable and suspected traits would raise calls for a psychoanalytic investigation if it was done on a layperson. In a president, in aggregate, they are truly cause for alarm. The list of worrisome, evident, and alleged attributes that emerge in these and other portraits is long. Narcissist, liar, racist, sexist, adulterer, baby, hypocrite, chiseler, tax cheat, outlaw, psychopath, paranoid, fraud, ignorant, vengeful, delusional, arrogant, greedy, contemptuous, unsympathetic, learning disabled, cruel, obstructor of justice, threat to the Constitution, traitor. The list is so long that it can be overwhelming. It's a challenge to remember the beginning by the time you make it to the end. There are times when I wish someone would help us remember all the troubling aspects of Trump's character and behavior, past and present, in a way that would encourage recognition of the totality of his pathology, rather than its component parts, which individually cause alarm before being temporarily forgotten when the next emergency presents itself. As an applied psychoanalyst, my task is not only to appreciate the full list, but also to ignore the big picture and focus on a single pathology at a time. Practitioners of applied psychoanalysis approach their subject as both theoretician and clinician. The theoretician endeavors to piece things together, to figure things out, while the clinician tries to approach each session capable of being surprised, as if his mind were a blank slate. The analysis in the following pages aspires to accomplish both goals: reviewing Trump's record with a clinician's eye, preparing to be surprised by the unexpected observation, and assembling these findings into a more comprehensive portrait. The image of hypothetical patient Trump rattling the consulting room door and banging on the window reminds us that President Trump doesn't want us to see the entire list at once. Not only that, but patients I've treated who are reminiscent of Trump cannot tolerate being inside the consulting room either. They leave my office whenever they feel unable to think their way through an anxiety-provoking interpretation, much the way Trump leaves press briefings when the questions get too close. Trump on the Couch by Justin Frank. Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, you know, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann, people who support our program there get, you know, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to patreon.com/Thom Hartmann and check out what we're doing and support our program. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And let's get to our calls. Oh, hang on just a second. Got to push the right button. There we go. Okay, Jackie in Lakeport, California. Hey, Jackie, what's on your mind today?
Yes, I just wanted to make you aware that Facebook is doing their part by suspending people from posting the phone numbers to call to report voter suppression.
You're kidding?
And, yeah.
You mean like 1-866-OUR-VOTE? If you post that on Facebook, they what do they do?
Well, if you try to post it to multiple sites, they flag you as, I presume, a bot. It would be their excuse. Mm-hmm. But they don't allow you to appeal it, and so you're pretty much shut off for the day.
Did that happen to you, Jackie?
Yes, that just happened. They've cut me off 6 times, each time for political action proposed, never for cussing or insulting someone. You know, I don't bother with all that. Anyway, 2 of the people that I work with in other parts of the country who do the same thing, we try to share articles to, like, red states that are only controlled by Sinclair Broadcasting. Right. When you post the article a few times, you get suspended. One time I was suspended for a full month. I expect today they'll be done with me by the end of the day, because there will be no more point. Anyway, that's probably more common than has been discussed. but it's something that.
But apparently the Nazis are doing just fine over there. Well, I shouldn't say that so glibly. I know that Facebook has tried to stop some of the Nazi posts, but.
Well, I suspect that some of it is that there may be moles. That would be my guess, is that there are moles. That the company may be doing whatever, but moles can get anywhere, you know.
Yeah.
So that would be my guess, because most of the time the political stuff now goes through. A year ago, that wasn't true.
Interesting.
So anyway, I wanted to let you know about that, and I was trying to post iwillvote.com, which your guest mentioned earlier from the Democratic Party.
Right.
That's the website the Democrats are running to help with suppression. And the number he gave, I believe, was 833-336-8683.
It may be. I didn't write it down when he said it, and I don't have it in front of me. But
yeah, I believe that was it.
Okay.
But I know that the iwillvote.com is correct.
Right.
Anyway, if people can share that individually, we can maybe begin to get some traction. But I posted to maybe 30 sites this morning in places like Indiana and Colorado, and some of the places that were really badly affected by the suppression are still Kansas, Georgia.
So Jackie's been banned from Facebook for posting, good government information. So please do it yourself, in other words, right?
Yeah, it's the third time they've banned me for this same thing.
Amazing.
And all I'm doing is giving the number. There's no comment. There's nothing that could offend community standards.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Unless community standards are to defeat democracy.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, Jackie, thank you. And keep us up to date on how it's going. I appreciate the call. Thank you. Brad in Elk Grove Village, Illinois. Hey, Brad, what's up?
Hey, my idea of paying attention to like Trump and stuff like that, and I know you tend to disagree with that, is this. We have a choice in this election. We can either choose to be a welcoming, humanitarian, decent, shining city on the hill, America, where we're accepting and tolerant of differences, or we can be an intolerant, bigoted, hate-filled, ugly America. That's my comment. My other comment relates to the world economy.
Okay.
Hello?
Yeah, I just said that's what's on the ballot. Go ahead. World economy.
Yep. The world economy I liken to a big super tanker. Even if you put the engines in reverse, it takes 20 miles to stop this thing once the momentum is built up. And the world economy, I think, the more we unsettle it, they're going to learn to live without us, a large portion. We're 1/23 of the world's population, and the other part of that equation is while we may have a huge financial influence in the rest of the world, I think, a lot of them will turn away from us, and that echoes your comments about setting up different payment systems.
Yeah, this is from the first hour of the program. I was quoting from Chuck Miller's piece from the newsletter from the Aiden forecast today, where he was talking about there was a big Treasury auction yesterday. They were trying to basically sell off Treasury bonds, which is how the government borrows money in order to give that money to billionaires for their tax cuts that the Republicans gave them, and people weren't buying. So the yield went up. In other words, we have to pay more in interest to get people to buy our bonds, which is going to cost the country a whole lot more money. And it's a really, really bad sign for the future.
Right. And my point is we Trump may want to blow stuff up and stuff like that, but he has nothing to replace it with, which becomes anarchy. But my other point is, and this is why I listen to Trump, the rest of the world is listening to him, and Trump tries to blow up the world economy or turn away from it or make everybody kowtow to the United States at our pace.
I get that, Brad, but what I'm saying on this program is that I'm not putting my hands over my eyes, my thumbs, and my ears here. What I'm simply saying is I'm not going to rebroadcast Trump's hateful, bigoted, asinine often speeches or comments or anything. I just, he's essentially banned from my airwaves. I will, however, read to you what he says and then tell you what I think about it, when appropriate. So I think, frankly, the rest of the media should do that. His face should stop appearing. He watches TV all day long. They don't let him actually run the country. Literally, he's got executive time, they call it, which is, TV with cheeseburgers up in the quarters upstairs. He's seriously 8 hours a day. He's either doing executive time.
I don't deny that.
Or he's traveling around the country, having thousands of people, give him tongue baths, tell him how wonderful he is with his so-called rallies.
And it's a serious issue when just a regular truck driver who drives in the city of Chicago would make a better president than him, if only because I would listen to differing opinions and try to figure out where they fit. And part of that is where Trump is just, has his thumbs in his ears to the rest of the world. And the rest of the world is listening and watching him, and they're basically saying, we can't have confidence that anything this guy says is either the truth or he's going to follow through with much, simply because of the resistance in this country. And the problem is he's not a person that wants to work with anyone else. It's all his way or the highway, and the rest of the world is going to say, well, guess what? We're going to hit the highway.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. All he's got to sell is fear and hate. And it's so unfortunate. Brad, thank you for the call. And thanks for listening to CPT. Larry in Charlotte, North Carolina. Hey, Larry, what's up?
Hey, Tom. How are you, buddy?
Good. What's on your mind?
I just got a question for you. Why do you think it is that of all the people that he's either fired or quit or he's absolutely humiliated, why they still support him?
You mean like Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham?
Like all of them. Like Scaramouche and all of them.
Yeah. I think it's because Donald Trump is president of the United States, and as such, he wields enormous power. And both actual, naked, raw political power, actually, there's kind of three categories. He wields the political is not quite the right word. The legal power of the office of the presidency. He has the ability to do things and get things done and make things happen that will work on behalf of, for example, big industries that want, that are funding in many cases these Republican members of Congress. So they want to not antagonize him. Then he's got political power. He can take down somebody just by attacking them, which is why Jeff Flake and Bob Corker are actually leaving the Senate right now, because they dared to confront him and he just cut their knees out from under them. And then finally he has this kind of social power. It's like, Lindsey Graham is obviously, he's the kind of personality that has to be the wingman, right? He's got to have the big dog, above him. And I think Ted Cruz probably the same thing. They're authoritarian followers as opposed to authoritarian leaders, and they have to have a leader. And Donald Trump has come along and said, "I'll be the authoritarian leader. I'll be the big daddy. You all can find protection under my wings. I'll wrap my arms around you." And that's what he's doing with Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz. Lindsey Graham, who I'm guessing, in a few weeks is going to be the U.S. Attorney General. We'll see. But, or in 2020, he's going to be on the ticket as vice president. Larry, thanks for the call, because Lindsey Graham is playing this exactly that way. He's a very ambitious guy.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this here on the Thom Hartmann Program, helping you win the water cooler wars, the place where despair is not an option. And welcome back, Lynn in Los Angeles. Hey, Lynn, thanks for watching Free Speech. What's up?
Oh, hi, Tom. I wanted to say that it seems to me that the right wing provides easy slates for people to vote so they know how to vote for judges and things down ballot.
Right.
And when I go to vote, it took me like 3 hours. I'm a doctor. I'm not, a dumpski. But, it's really difficult. And I had to go on the Sierra Club website. I went on the Bernie website, but that software didn't really work very well. I went on the American Federation of Teachers, and then I went on a vote for judge for Republicans. and then voted the exact opposite for all the judicial appointments. I looked on the National Lawyers Guild, and they didn't have anything. I think that.
In other words, let me just understand what you're saying, Lynn. I'm not a doctor. I'm sorry. It sounds to me like what you're saying is that the Republican on nonpartisan races where there's no D or R, as particularly judicial seats, there are actually judges who have been endorsed by Republicans, and the Republicans are overtly telling their voters, vote for these people, but the Democrats are not doing the same thing.
Yeah, they actually have, like, do not for, this is extremely bad, don't vote for him. I voted for everyone that they said that.
Right.
But the thing is, if we have a progressive slate, I've looked that up every time I've gone to vote, like progressive slate, green slate. You know, there's no voting slate for local elections. Right. And I think that if I am sure that, like, these evangelicals and all these right-wing groups, Tea Party and everything, I bet they have all that easily accessible for their members.
Oh, sure.
And I think it's really crucial because it took me 3 or 4 hours to figure out what to vote for by reading all these different things and then reading the actual pamphlets.
Right.
Most working people don't have time to do that kind of investigation.
You're absolutely right,
If they had a Progressive Party slate or Green Party slate or, you know, the Progressive Democrats of America, I think it would really, really be important, especially for judicial appointments and some of these down-ballot issues.
Yeah, although it could get very, very expensive for any group to try to do this nationally. But let me encourage you, Lynn, to contact your local Democratic Party and either show up yourself or just talk to somebody on the phone and make this pitch to them that the local party, the county party or the district party or the precinct party or however it's organized in your party in Los Angeles in California, should do exactly what you're suggesting, because it's a brilliant idea. And they would have the
yeah, you need a big
machinery to do
that.
Yeah. The other group to contact with regard to this would be probably MoveOn.org.
That's
again,
a good idea.
I doubt PDA has the resources, but MoveOn.org certainly does. They're a large multi-million-dollar organization with millions of members, and they could throw a couple $100,000 at this and make it happen.
That's an excellent suggestion. Well, thank you, Tom. And by the way, I encourage members, I try to make a monthly contribution so that then you don't have to have as many fundraising, efforts.
Yeah, thank you.
So I encourage anybody who's listening that has that kind of wherewithal to make monthly contributions so you become a sustaining contributor.
Yeah, it is a great way to support Free Speech TV, and Free Speech TV needs our help on an ongoing basis, even outside of the fundraising drives. And also, we're also right now on a whole bunch of Pacifica stations all around the country, and it's the same thing. Many of them are just wrapping up fundraising drives. Some of them are still in them. Support your local media. Wherever you're getting this program, support them. There's lots of ways to do it. And also on our Patreon page, the Thom Hartmann Patreon page, the money that we get from that Patreon page goes to pay for delivering our program to our Pacifica stations, to our nonprofit stations. So, there's a lot of ways to help out and help make things happen. Lynn, thank you for the call, and keep up the great work. We'll be back with Luke Vargas with Talk Media News in just a second. Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. People who support our program there get, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to patreon.com/Thom Hartmann and check out what we're doing and support our program. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. Luke Vargas, the chief foreign correspondent for Talk Media News, joins us today from Kingston, New York, where Democrat Antonio Delgado hopes to unseat Republican John Faso. Hey, Luke, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much.
So you're the chief foreign correspondent for Talk Media News, but you're reporting from a local Democratic district for a guy who's running for a state of New York position, not even the, or is it the
No,
US?
this is a congressional
This
seat.
is U.S. House. Okay. So what does this have to do with foreign policy?
Well, this election doesn't. You know, we're a small operation, so we spread our talent out where we can get it. And I can take a day off from foreign policy. Before getting into this gig, I covered 2 presidential elections, so it's sort of an old skill of mine. But I will say it's. Let me just comment briefly on this race. This is the New York 19th. It's a district that's in the Catskills, but it's one of those really odd-shaped districts that cuts out really any, if you want to call them, you know, urban areas. There's no Poughkeepsie, there's no Albany or Schenectady, and it's a really interesting district because it's basically even registrations between Democrats and Republicans. You've got a Republican in there now. His opponent, an African-American, Antonio Delgado, is Harvard-educated, a lawyer, a Rhodes Scholar, and yet his opponent, and the New York Times called him out for this, has been using what really do seem to be pretty race-baiting ads against Delgado, talking very disparagingly about a few songs that Delgado released as a rapper, sort of implying that he's dangerous and affiliated with crimes and drugs and all these things, which couldn't be further from the facts. So to me, this district is not just sort of, you know, close to where I am, but is an interesting referendum on sort of, you know, how fairly we're going to play the game of politics in the Trump era. And I think this will be a very interesting bellwether to watch later today. But you sort of asked, is there any foreign policy in this election? I was talking yesterday to Matthew Baum, who's over at the Kennedy School and studies political communications and also is a sort of foreign policy wonk. And he was, you know, he told me about this term called intermestic, basically international domestic issues, and saying that a few of the ones that are covered in this election, most by President Trump, fit sort of neatly in that borderline. Immigration, trade, both of those are really, depending on how you want to spin it, international issues, but that a domestic political operator can co-opt them and use them as purely domestic campaign messaging. And I think Trump has done that. He's taken, let's say, this migrant caravan, which could well be talked about if you are, you know, over at the United Nations as an international humanitarian issue, one where we should be, let's say, channeling our focus into building our relationship with the Mexican government so that they can enforce immigration and asylum law and things like that, or we spin it and make it all about crime and drugs and the fear of other people, you know, coming into the United States. The same with trade. You know, this is not being talked about in terms of negotiations or competitive advantage. It's being talked about, you know, sort of let's you know, force project, right? Let's assert American respect around the world. And it's, you know, midterm elections typically are not referendums on foreign policy, even less so than presidential elections, which occasionally get into topics like yay or nay on nation building overseas. But this is a particularly interesting election where Trump has really framed all of these sort of borderline intermestic issues as domestic ones. The one we haven't heard about, which I think is quite telling given Trump's populist sort of strongman streak here, is the war on terrorism. Remember, he campaigned on saying, hey, I'm going to defeat the Islamic State staff. And, you know, President Obama's been sitting on his hands on this. I'm going to win this war. Of course, we did have some sort of chest thumping and, you know, mission accomplished talk from the president on the war on terrorism several months ago. But I think it's telling that, you know, given that sort of trait of populist leaders, that they always are sort of portraying a perpetual crisis, right? The only thing standing between us and ruin is me, right? That Trump is not emphasizing, hey, you know, we dealt with ISIS. Instead, it's, hey, you know, you're going to need me to protect you from all these new threats. And if there is going to be admission of victory against the Islamic State, that's got to come until after the election.
You know who's doing the exact same thing, Luke? Viktor Orban in Hungary, Duterte in the Philippines, Erdogan in Turkey. I mean, these guys are literally playing the same playbook, and it's scary as hell to me that the President of the United States is doing this. I think for the first time in our history. I don't know if you're familiar with the XYZ affair during the John Adams presidency, when John Adams tried to play this card with regard to the French, and it blew up in his face, by the way. But to the best of my knowledge, that's the last time this kind of game got played.
I don't think it is, and I don't think it's the last time Trump will keep playing it. Again, this sense of sort of perpetual enemies abroad that need Trump to stand in the way to prevent them from taking over, I think is a theme he's going to keep hitting. I know we've just got a minute left. Let me just highlight that the daughter of the president, Ivanka Trump, it's been announced now, this is via sources in China, that apparently this decision was made last month, has won 16 new patents, or trademarks rather, for her fashion brand, which she said she was shutting down and disaffiliating.
And one for a voting machine, by the way.
Yes, a voting, I don't even know how to explain this. Some for voting machines, nursing homes, and sausage casings, in addition to shoes, wedding dresses, and jewelry. Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington crew has a great report on this, saying this is very concerning. This business can be resurrected as soon as she exits the administration, and now is in meetings with foreign leaders, possibly sort of building up her deck for sometime in the future.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Luke Vargas, you can follow Luke on Twitter at Buck Courier. Luke, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Tom. Talk to you soon.
Always great talking with you, Luke. I really appreciate your reports. We'll be right back with more of our coverage of the elections and your response to them right after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, you know, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. People who support our program there get, you know, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to patreon.com/Thom Hartmann and check out what we're doing and support our program. Thank you. Today, from Birthright Citizens, A History of Race and Rights in Antebellum America by Martha S. Jones. In the introduction, Rights of Colored Men Debating Citizenship in Antebellum America is the title of the introduction. The title of William Yates's 1838 treatise, Rights of Colored Men, aptly captures the subject of this book. The 19th century Americans for whom Yates wrote were fascinated by a juridical puzzle. Not slaves, nor aliens, nor the equals of free white men, who were former slaves and their descendants before the law. None were more interested in this question than black Americans themselves, and Birthright Citizens takes up their point of view to tell the history of race and rights in the antebellum United States. The pressures brought on by so-called black laws and colonization schemes, especially a radical strain, explain why free people of color feared their forced removal from the United States. In response, they claimed an unassailable belonging, one grounded in birthright citizenship. No legal text expressly provided for such, but their ideas anticipated the terms of the 14th Amendment. Set in Baltimore, a place between North, South, and the Atlantic world, this book traces the scenes and the debates through which black Americans developed ideas about citizenship and claims to the rights that citizens enjoyed. Along the way, they engaged with legislators, judges, and laws, everyday administrators. From the local courthouse to the chambers of high courts, the rights of colored men came to define citizenship for the nation as a whole. Yates authored the very first legal treatise on the rights of free black Americans. It was 1838 when Rights of Colored Men to Suffrage, Citizenship, and Trial by Jury was published in Philadelphia. He was not one of antebellum America's highly regarded legal minds. Some say he read law for a time, although there's no evidence that he was admitted to the bar. Instead, Yates's career began with a short-lived stint as a newspaper publisher in his hometown of Troy, New York. His bona fides on the subject of race and citizenship were best established during his years as an agent for the American Anti-Slavery Society. While many abolitionists maintained a self-conscious distance from free black communities, Yates centered his work there. The opposition of free people, the oppression of free people of color was a companion to slavery in Yates's view, with anti-slavery work necessarily extending into questions of free people's status. Penning Rights of Colored Men was the pinnacle of this mission. Yates placed a powerful instrument of authority in the hands of free African Americans and their allies. The antebellum legal treatise was a key tool in the standardization and dissemination of legal knowledge and was typically devoted to the comprehensive synthesis of a single branch of law. By the late 1830s, Yates was following on the success of James Kent's commentaries and Joseph Story's treatise series. The genre had come to be associated with the concepts of law as scientific knowledge, legal education as systemic, and the profession as respectable. Yates successfully adopted legal culture's own tool to such a degree that readers from the 19th century until today have regarded him as an authority on free black legal status. But Yates's text was also a work of advocacy. Rights of Colored Men received prominent notices in the black and abolitionist press and could be purchased at local anti-slavery society offices. As a result, the work served as a probing legal treatise that fueled activist arguments. Yates provides a window into the position that some activists, black and white, took on race and citizenship in the end of the 1830s. Law was an instrument of change, and Yates forthrightly explained his objective: to undermine prejudice against color. Racism had led to legal disability, exclusion from militia service, naturalization, suffrage, public schooling, ownership of real property, office holding, and courtroom testimony. Yates was especially unsettled by the disenfranchisement of free black men in New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, and more recently Pennsylvania. Assembling evidence from legal culture, he believed, would help establish the rights and citizenship of free black people. Yates began with a story of the nation's origin. The establishment of the United States, he said, had been at the outset a revolutionary, Republican, and an enlightened undertaking that was untainted by racism or distinctions among and between races. This had been possible in the wake of the American Revolution because the founding generation knew firsthand the contributions black people had made to independence through military service and through labor. American law had originally been colorblind, as evidenced by the absence of racial distinctions in founding documents such as the federal and state constitutions. Change came in the early 19th century at the fault line between generations. A forgetting occurred, Yates posited. Lawmakers of the early republic did not know how black people had contributed to the nation's founding and hence were entitled to the privileges and immunities of citizens. In this sense, Yates's aim was partly to restore that past to the nation's political and legal memory. To achieve this, he compiled a history of lawmakers and their deliberations, in which he found the development of anti-black prejudice in courts, constitutional conventions, and legislatures. He followed the professional lives of men whose work included roles from low-level administrator to convention delegate and judge. Their ideas about free black people moved with them. Most powerful was Yates's argument about how law, through suffering from amnesia, could be made right. The book, Birthright Citizens, A History of Race and Rights in Antebellum America.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It is Election Day. If you haven't voted, stop listening to this program right now and go out and vote. Or put your earbuds in, continue to listen to this program and go out and vote. But get out there and vote. And if you have voted, try to get 5 friends to the polls. Offer people rides, call them up, offer them encouragement, nurture them, help them. If you had any problems at the polls, the number is 866-OUR-VOTE, O-U-R-V-O-T-E, 866. It's toll free from anywhere in the United States. And, you know, pretty straightforward stuff. It's election day. What are we going to see? How's this going to shake out? We've also talked about, you know, comparing what might happen over the next 2 years to past times. The times that come to mind are the last couple of years of the Hoover administration, 1929, 1930, 1931, and the third and fourth years of the Clinton administration, 2005, 2006, when the Republicans had the ability to hold hearings and go after President Clinton. You know, for a whole variety of things. I mean, it was constant, you know, nonstop scandal, right? And eventually they found something that would stick. You know, how are the Democrats going to play this? How is this going to play out? Will that empower Trump? Trump fights back. Trump kicks back. Bill Clinton didn't. Bill Clinton kind of, you know, just kept his head down and kept saying, oh, that's no big deal. There's nothing to see there with Whitewater, and there's nothing to see there with Travelgate. There's nothing to see there with Rose Law Firm. And there's nothing to see there with all those women. Trump, on the other hand, comes back and says, they're lying, those SOBs are great. You know, and I mean, you know, we saw this with Brett Kavanaugh, which raises another interesting question is, if you're a woman, and if you were even remotely undecided about which party was on your side, I'm curious how the Brett Kavanaugh hearings caused you to think, you know, whether they caused you to think that you should be voting for a Democrat or a Republican. I'm getting, you know, there was an article over at DU. There's a bunch of other articles floating around about people being interviewed at the polls, women being interviewed at the polls, who say, I've been a Republican for years and years, but I'm voting Democratic this time because I watched Brett Kavanaugh. I watched Christine Blasey Ford, and I believed her. And I watched him, and he came across as an entitled ass, you know, as a frat boy jock jerk, which he obviously was and is. And, you know, this man should not be on the Supreme Court. And so I'm going to vote straight Democratic. I mean, you know, it's like, what are the things that are motivating you to vote for whomever you're voting for? I'm curious. The lines are all full right now, but as we take calls, they'll pop open. So give us a shout. Lou in Pueblo, Colorado. Hey, Lou, what's up? Lou, you are on the air.
Yes. Yeah, I had a comment on where I think the Democratic Party is shooting themselves in the ass. I hear a lot of progressive, and including Bernie and the DNC, talking about how basically economic progress is a zero-sum game. We have to take from the rich to give to the poor, or we'll take from the poor to give to the rich. In reality, the best example to prove this point is China. They basically only help the poor. They leave the rich alone, and China is creating billionaires faster than the U.S., faster than any other country on earth.
Yeah, I don't see any analogy there at all, Lou. And I'm just sick of the Democratic bash, the people bashing the Democratic Party. And sure, I am not going to put up with it anymore. Albert in Marina Del Rey, California. Hey, Albert, what's up?
Hey, Tom, thanks for taking my call. I want to talk about the dichotomy between Democratic voters and how we choose the people we're going to elect, specifically based on race. So as you know, blacks, when we vote 90+% for Democrats, and whites don't vote at that same rate. And one of the issues that blacks have, and getting us to turn out is we don't often get the candidates that we want. And a lot of that has to do around the vernacular and the way, we speak. And what depresses us from voting further is we get candidates that don't go in there sometimes and do what they say. I know we talk a lot about values, but some people just want to hear what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, and that's it. Not so much about values. Because
what's your point, Albert?
Now, and the Republicans don't have values. But my point is we need to open up, be more open to who we vote for. values isn't everything. It's what you're going to do.
Are you telling Democrats that they should consider voting for a Republican, Albert?
No. I'm saying, so for instance, often when you vote for a black person, they have to speak a certain way. They can't speak like Donald Trump, for example. Does that make sense?
I don't. Do you mean use the language of, or do you mean use the essentially kind of provincial accent of?
The temperament.
The temperament.
Meaning Obama
Okay.
was very slow, and he spoke methodically. But yet, sometimes you see black people speaking with it's more passion, but it turns white people off, and we often get candidates who aren't as enthusiastic about doing what we say. We just get people who give us lip service.
Albert, this is Albert, thanks for the call. This is not the day to be complaining about our elected officials. And Shira, I do not want any more calls like that, please. Pat in Newport, Oregon. Hey, Pat, what's up?
Hold it, I got to take you off speaker here.
Yeah, let's try Robert in Akron, Ohio. Hey, Robert, what's on your mind today?
Thank you for taking my call. I definitely got out and ended up voting for Richard Cordray. I was actually feeling pretty fortunate to have gotten to participate in our primary because, I was a big fan of both Kucinich and Richard Cordray. But I was just wanting to let everybody know, issue 1 is, if you're having listeners from Ohio, issue 1 is a very big deal because what issue 1 is going to do is reduce the prison sentences for people in prison for nonviolent drug offenses by 25%, and it's going to go ahead and reclassify possession of drugs from a felony to a misdemeanor, and you're not even going to be able to go to jail for possession unless you get 3 strikes within 2 years. So it's important for everybody to go ahead, get out and vote issue 1, and hopefully vote a straight Democratic ticket. So that was my point today.
Okay, you said it very well. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate the call. Paul in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Paul, what's up?
Hi, it's Paul. I listened to another caller an hour or more ago, but there was somebody complaining about the Democratic Party not doing enough to make the voting system fair. Well, you have to realize that the voting system is determined by your state. It is not the Democratic Party who determines that. It's not a national thing. It's you have to fix it in your own state. And I'm a ex-Californian, and I loved voting in California. I never had any problems with it. But now I live in New Mexico. And I'm telling you, New Mexico is the model for the rest of the country because we have early voting starting at least a month before the election. I can vote anywhere in the state, and they will print out my ballot for the precinct that I live in. So there's no problem with getting to the polls and to vote what's close to you. In Bernalillo County, where I live, they even have a mobile voting unit that's going out to senior citizens' homes and setting up shop for the senior citizens to come and vote where they live. So, it should be, that's the way it should be all over the country. I can vote anywhere in the state of New Mexico for a month before the election day, and I can get my ballot wherever I show up because they do require voter ID, but IDs are really easy to get here. And so it's really simple to vote, and that should be our model for the country. And I think that Maggie Sluse Oliver is our Secretary of State. When we get through with this particular election, we should look at her as an example of someone who can teach the rest of the country how we should vote.
That's great. What's your Secretary of State's name? Do you recall?
Maggie Sluse Oliver.
Okay, cool. Is she a Republican or a Democrat?
Oh, she's Democrat.
Yeah, fascinating. Paul, thanks a lot for the call. That's fascinating to know, and thanks for listening to us on 1350 AM there in Albuquerque. We'll be right back. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's 15 minutes past the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where smart people get their news. More on the election. Why are you voting? What do you care about today? And welcome back. Leslie in Seattle. Hey, Leslie. Thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's up?
Hey. I was responding to the doctor that called half an hour ago or so, expressing her angst about finding judges and who should she vote for on the Democratic ticket. So living here in Seattle, we have a bi-weekly free publication called The Stranger. And for about the last 8 or 9 years, they put out a whole article, from federal to state recommendations to your legislative district to judges, saying who they actually have an election board. And these people come in and meet with them, and they explain why they have chosen this person or this initiative to vote for. So, I mean, it all covers Washington. It's online. I've been looking at it for 8 or 9 years. It's funny. So my recommendation is to check out what alternative newspapers people have in their individual states and see if they offer something like The Stranger.
That is a great suggestion, Leslie, and I should have thought of that back when I used to do a local show here in Portland, Oregon. We have 2 local newspapers, the Portland Mercury and the Willamette Week. And I don't know if the Mercury, I haven't read either one of them in a while, but Willamette Week used to do exactly the same thing the Strangers did. They would invite all the candidates in, they'd sit down and talk with them, they'd transcribe it, they'd summarize it in the newspaper. They made specific endorsements. They said, if you want this, vote for these people. If you want this, vote for these people. I mean, it was all, and here's what the ballot measures really mean, so that you could sort through the confusing language, the legalese in the ballot measures. So, all that kind of stuff. So good one, Leslie. Thanks a lot.
It's much more interesting than going through your voters' pamphlet.
Yeah, there you go. I agree. Leslie, thank you for that suggestion, and thanks for putting that in my head. I'll remember it, and I'll say it next time. Thank you. Robin in Kensington, Washington. Hey, Robin. Or Kingston, Washington. Hey, Robin, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Aspirations are on my mind today, and that's what the basis of this call is. First, I want to just say you're clearly being listened to by the Democratic Party. You've had four representatives on this week, and they're feeling the heat, which is great because we're going to make them do better. But regardless of why this is aspirational is that I am looking forward to tomorrow and the next day, week, month, the years to 2020. I'm going to call what happens tonight or today's vote a rainbow woman's high tide. The blue wave needs to come about in 2020. And the blue wave is a function of the Democratic Party. And I don't think they've really done that. I think that if you listen to Rachel Maddow last night, she said that there were 6,000 local organizations of the indivisible groups, which is people localizing, organizing locally, having their political power trickle upward, which is the tenet of my civil information document. But here's my aspiration. While the women are at it, there's 3 things I'm going to suggest to look forward to.
You got 10 seconds.
In the next years. 1 is pass the ERA. 2 is restore the League of Women Voters to run the primary debates. And then also a personal favor and a personal heartbeat for me is to restart the peace movement. And in that regard, I'm going to ask that you consider during your heartbreaks that you read Juliet Ward Howe's Mother's Day proclamation.
Oh, I remember that well, Robin. Okay, thank you for that. We will do that. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann, people who support our program there get, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to patreon.com/Thom Hartmann and check out what we're doing and support our program. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and Amy in Rockford, Illinois. Hey, Amy, what's on your mind today?
Hey, thanks for taking my call. I'm out of breath because you're catching me going out the door to go back to the Democratic headquarters in our area and keep calling. So
cool.
My thorn in my side is the absentee voting. When I filled out my form on the envelope, it requires postage now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very confusing from what I've read across the country, within states, within counties, and it doesn't list what the postage is. So many people remember, like I did, just mailing it. We never had to put postage on before.
Yeah.
So finally, I was able to dig around, and here in beautiful Rockford, it's 50 cents to mail it. And which, interestingly, to receive it, for the government to mail it out, it costs 14 cents.
Huh.
I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
But anyway, my point is...
But 50 cents is what a
that's
stamp costs these days, right? So it's just one stamp.
Well, actually, you would think the forever stamp would cover it.
Right,
Because,
yeah. So
Yeah,
it's basic,
but
it's
no,
basic
yeah,
first-class mail, in other words. Yeah.
No, you have to have 2 stamps on it, 2 forever stamps.
2 forever stamps?
Yeah.
Why is
I
that?
know.
I thought one forever stamp is like, this covers your postage forever for first-class mail.
It makes sense.
But it's oversized?
Pardon me?
Is it oversized or overweight or something? I don't get it.
No, it's got your ballot envelope in your ballot, and then the smaller envelope, then you receive it.
Right.
But see, this is my point, is a lot of people, you don't know what the postage is.
Right.
I mean, it's, most people would put on a forever stamp and think that it's covered.
I would think so.
Yeah.
How do you know it's not?
Pardon me?
How do you know that it takes 2 stamps?
Because I've called around, within Illinois.
Right.
But in states, it varies from county to county, literally, not even state to state. So, but my point with that is I've voted in other elections, and like I said, I just mailed the envelope in, no problem. It was postage paid.
Right.
Well, now making you have to have postage on it, I feel like that's depressing, especially like millennials. I know my son's 24. He's like, well, I don't have any stamps.
Right. Yeah. A lot of people don't have stamps. They use email now these days instead of postage. Well, Amy, I don't know the answer to the. Thank you for the call. Whether it takes 1 stamp or 2. I mean, it should. If election officials are listening, please, on the outside of the envelope, you can put a little box. You can print it just like you're printing your return address. I mean, you're pre-printing these envelopes. You can put a little box and say, put 1 stamp here. Or put 2 stamps here, whatever it takes. But get out there and vote. Larry, and today it's probably too late to mail in ballots anyway, so, get to the polls. Larry, and obviously that's going to vary from place to place, but I know in Oregon it's too late. Your ballot has to arrive by today. Or you can physically drop it off. There's drop-off locations all over the state today, but, this is it. Larry, in Moravia, New York, am I saying that right, or is it Moravia?
Yeah, it's Moravia.
Moravia.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to talk to you. And I just went and voted, and I just wanted to say that I was voting for the environment first off, because they just totally decimated all our regulations, I think. And then the other thing I was voting for was, I was just going to mention real quick, and thank you so much for picking up my call quickly, that, if people don't like health care, then I guess they like hanging around with people that are sick, because I don't like that. So health care is a great thing, and if everybody's healthier, everyone's happier. And the last one was that if nobody's hungry, they're also happier. And that is my point, Tom.
Right. If
and
nobody's hungry...
No,
Larry, stick around. If nobody's hungry, you literally see crime go down. In the countries that have Food insecurity is the phrase that the U.S. government uses, and we've got about 20 million Americans who are experiencing food insecurity right now. In other words, they go to bed hungry at least once a month. In those countries, you have higher crime rates. And with regard to national health system, every time that there's an Ebola outbreak or anything like this, the Republicans, remember Chris Christie quarantining that nurse? And it's like, oh my God, be afraid, oh my God. Well, the best way to fight an epidemic, a public health disaster like an epidemic, is to have a national health care system where everybody can, quickly get access to health care. And instead of having, 20–30% of your population unable to go to the doctor or the hospital because they simply can't afford to pay for it, or it would wipe them out, and probably another half the population unwilling to do it because they can't, because half of Americans literally cannot right now sustain a $400 expense without having to put it on a credit card or throwing themselves into a financial disaster. We need to fix this, Larry. Larry, thank you for the call. Very well said. We need to fix this, and we need to fix it now. And Republicans are not going to fix it. Republicans only care about rich people and the big corporations that make them rich, the people who line their pockets. Democrats are here for you.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Unless you happen to be a billionaire. But even then, if you don't want to live in a poor man's country, if you don't want to be a rich man in a poor country, vote Democratic today. Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Settlers, the Mythology of the White Proletariat, the True Story of the White Nation by J. Sakai, published by Morningstar Press in 1989. This is from Chapter 2, The Foundations of Settler Life. The life of European settlers and the class structure of their society was abnormal because it was dependent upon a foundation of conquest, genocide, and enslavement. The myth of the self-sufficient white settler family clearing the wilderness and supporting themselves through their own initiative and hard labor is a propaganda fabrication. It is the absolute characteristic of settler society to be parasitic, dependent upon the super-exploitation of oppressed peoples for its style of life. Never has Euro-American society completely supported itself. This is the decisive factor in the consciousness of all classes and strata of white society from 1600 to now. Settler society was raised up above the level of backward old Europe by a foundation of conquest. This conquest was a miracle drug for a Europe convulsed with the reaction of decaying feudalism and deadly capitalism. Shot into the veins of the Spanish feudal nation, for instance, the miracle drug of the New World conquest gave Spain the momentary power to overrun North Africa, Holland, and Italy before her historical incident waned. Like many such fixes for Euro-Americans, this conquest was addicting. It was habit-forming and rapidly indispensable, not only culturally, but in the mechanism of an oppressor society whose lifeblood was new conquest. We'll examine this later in the relationship of settlerism to imperialism. For now, it's enough to see that this conquest is a material act of great magnitude, an economic and social event as important as the emergence of the factory system or the exploitation of petroleum in the Middle East. We stress the obvious here because the Euro-American settlers have always made light of their invasion and occupation, although the conquered territory is the precondition for their whole society. Traditionally, European settler societies throw off the propaganda smoke screens that they didn't really conquer and dispossess other nations. They claim with false modesty that they merely moved into vacant territory. So the early English settlers depicted America as empty, a howling wilderness, unsettled, sparsely populated, just waiting with a vacant sign on the door for the first lucky civilization to walk in and claim it. Theodore Roosevelt wrote defensively in 1900, quote, "The settler and pioneer have at bottom had justice on their side. This great continent could not have been kept as nothing but a game preserve for squalid savages," end of quote. It is telling that this lie is precisely the same lie put forward by white Afrikaner settlers who claim that South Africa was literally totally uninhabited by any Africans when they arrived from Europe. To universal derision, these European settlers claim to be the only rightful historic inhabitants of South Africa. Or we can hear similar defenses put forward by the European settlers of Israel, who claim that much of the Palestinian land and buildings they occupy are rightfully theirs, since the Arabs had allegedly decided to voluntarily abandon it all during the 1948-49 war. Are these kinds of tales any less preposterous than those put forward by Euro-American settlers? America was spacious and sparsely populated only because the European invaders destroyed whole civilizations and killed off millions of Native Americans to get the land and profits they wanted. We all know that when the English arrived at Virginia, for example, they encountered an urban, village-dwelling society far more skilled than they were in the arts of medicine, agriculture, fishing, and government. This civilization was reflected in a chain of 300 Indian nations and peoples stretching from the Arctic Circle to the tip of South America, many of whom had highly developed societies. There was, in fact, a greater population in these Indian nations in 1492 than in all of Western Europe. Recent scholarly estimates indicate that at the time of Columbus, there were 100 million Indians in the hemisphere, 10 million in North America, 25 million in Central Mexico, and an additional 65 million elsewhere in Central and South America. These numbers have long been concealed since they give rise to the logical question of what happened to this great mass of people. The European invaders, Spanish, Dutch, English, Portuguese, and French, simply killed off millions and millions to safeguard their conquest of the land and provide the disposable slave labor they needed to launch their new world. Conservative Western historical estimates show that the Spanish reduced, in quotes, the Indian population of their colonies from some 50 million to only 4 million by the end of the 17th century. And from the 10 million Indians who once inhabited North America, after 4 centuries of settler invasion and rule, there were in 1900 perhaps 200,000 to 300,000 surviving descendants in the United States. This was the very substantial down payment towards the continuing blood price that third world nations have to pay to sustain the Euro-American way of life. So when we hear that the settlers pushed out the Indians or forced the Indians to leave their traditional hunting grounds, we know that these are just code phrases to refer politely to the most barbaric genocide imaginable. It could well be the greatest crime in all of human history. Only here, the Adolf Eichmanns and Heinrich Himmlers had names like Benjamin Franklin and Andrew Jackson. The point is that genocide was not an accident, not an excess, not the unintended side effect of virile European growth. Genocide was the necessary and deliberate act of the capitalists and their settler shock troops. The book Settlers. All aboard! It's a once-in-a-lifetime luxury Alaskan cruise on the Regent Seven Seas Mariner, July 24th, 2019. For more information, Keen Luxury Travel, 800-856-1155. And did I mention we'll be getting active on board with special events with yours truly, me and Louise, as we visit Ketchikan, Juneau, Skagway, Sitka, Hubbard Glacier, and Anchorage.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Skagway. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, 34 minutes past the hour, and it seems like a really cool time for a geeky science alert. Here you go. Yes, it's our geeky science for the day. The headline, this is off Aldernet Cody Fenwick. Harvard astrophysicists think a mysterious interstellar object could have been built by aliens. Yeah, seriously. Scientists and stargazers alike. Last year, this object, the first object, literally the first object that we know outside of a comet that has come from outside our solar system, passed close by the sun. They called it Oumuamua. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, O-U-M-U-A-M-U-A. And they long believed it was possible for such a thing to exist, but this is the first time it's been observed. And then as they're watching this thing heading toward the sun, this very strange thing happens. Quote, as it passed by the sun, it accelerated, speeding up in a way we wouldn't expect it to if it were simply being driven by the force of gravity, end quote. So now there's like two possibilities that these are Harvard astrophysicists are seriously considering. The first is that it was sent here on purpose by an alien civilization, that it was a targeted probe, and I quote, is a targeted probe on a reconnaissance mission and not a member of a random population of objects. Or the second is that it was working like a solar sail, and it's a piece of space junk from an alien civilization. It could be a light sail floating in interstellar space as debris from an advanced technological equipment. And they say if that's the case, space might be littered with this stuff. On the other hand, if it's an actual, like a cargo vessel, this is the kind of thing that might be used, abundantly used for transportation of cargoes between planets, these light sails. And it's just basically going from sun to sun because, the massive gravity and flying around the universe. So pretty amazing stuff. Anyhow, back to Election Day today. Sean in Kenilworth, New Jersey. Hey, Sean, what's on your mind today?
Hi. So today I had the opportunity to vote for a good progressive in Thom Malinowski. I'm really excited about Thom Malinowski because I also want to see Leonard Lance hit the road. Leonard Lance, who's been, a quote moderate, but votes with Trump, the majority of the time. But I also voted for an imperfect senator in Bob Menendez because I know the importance of having a check on the executive branch in the era of Trump.
Yep.
And to address the last caller, no, not every Democrat is going to be perfect. And I think we, if we didn't learn from 2016 that you need to be pragmatic and not always idealistic in terms of the candidates you're going to support, I would rather vote for anybody with a D next to their name than have yet another kowtowing Republican in the Congress. We need a check on the executive branch. That's how the system works. If we don't have checks and balances, and clearly the Republican-controlled Congress at this point is going to just let Trump get away with anything that he wants to do and not investigate any of the wide array of egregious, unethical, and criminal things that his administration has been involved in. We need to get a Democratic Congress, into the legislature so that we can keep this criminal organization that is Trump and his administration, under check. But you need to be pragmatic. And like you said, today's not the day to be complaining about Democrats. It's a day to go out and vote for everybody with a D next to their name. And I feel optimistic that, everything that you're hearing is that the voter turnout is way up. Even though here in New Jersey it's raining out, people are still going and voting. Voter turnout is up from what it was 4 years ago in the 2014 midterm elections. So we have to be cautiously optimistic, but I do feel optimistic that we're going to make this happen, and people just have to vote for candidates with D's next to their names, and let's get it done.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And for me, it could be a real challenge because, this program, this is the #1 progressive program on radio in the United States, and Talkers Magazine says we have between 5 and 6 million listeners, and so if a Republican organization is trying to get out a message that would depress or suppress the Democratic vote, this is one of the places where they're going to try and get that message out. So, when somebody calls in and says, oh, I'm a Democrat, I'm a lifelong Democrat, I'm a real progressive, and I'm real unhappy with the Democratic Party, I think about half the time it's actually a Democrat, and about half the time it's somebody who's reading a script for $10 or $100 that was paid for by one of these right-wing groups of the Republican Party. And it's hard for me sometimes to filter which is which, right? But in any case, today is the day that I'm not accepting either one. So Sean, thank you for the call, and spot on. You just nailed it, and you said it very well. Bill in Sun City, Arizona. Hey, Bill, what's up?
I'd like to talk about my voting experience today.
Go for it.
It was wonderfully cathartic, but I got to vote for somebody I've liked since the day I met her many years ago, Kristen Sinema, and I hope she does well. But today, I've been voting here for 16 years. Today was the first time, Tom, I had to wait. Usually, I'm in there and out of there in 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It took an hour today.
Wow.
And I was glad to do it.
That's great. So you must live in a largely white area, Bill?
I live in a seniors community, Sun City, Arizona.
Yeah.
Largely snowbirds and retirees.
Yep.
And the reason that it took long was, from what I could hear, was there were a couple of people that their residency was an issue. But I was glad to see that the poll workers worked through it with them, and they were allowed to vote.
That's
and everything worked out great.
That's great. Bill, thank you for that story. It's great to hear. Bill, what amazes me, I think back to the 2004 election, when in Ohio, John Kerry, well, we're not even sure he lost Ohio. There's a whole lot of different questions, particularly since all the provisional ballots, none of the provisional ballots were even opened or counted. And there were more provisional ballots than there were the number of votes by which John Kerry supposedly lost Ohio. But I remember watching on TV where the TV anchors were like, wow, this is amazing. People are standing in line in Ohio for 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours. Some of these people have been in line. These people are they must really care about their vote. And nobody was saying, what the hell is going on? Why are these people waiting 10 hours? And Bill, like you said, you never waited more than 30 minutes to vote. I've never waited more than 30 minutes to vote in my entire life, but I've always lived in white suburban areas or in progressive cities like Portland, Oregon, and it just is nuts that if you are poor or if you are black or if you are Hispanic, you should have to wait 8 hours. This is intentional. This is not some accident of nature. It's not a force of nature that people who have more pigment in their skin should have to stand in line for 8. I mean, it's just nuts, Bill. Excuse me.
By design, Tom.
Yeah, it's absolutely by design, and it's time to put an end to this practice.
And I think we are. I have great faith, that the youngsters are waking up. What the older Republicans don't know about the young kids that are coming to the polls is that those kids are a lot smarter than they are.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, this is the most woke generation I've seen since my generation, since I was a kid. Although I don't know, maybe I'm misjudging the Gen Xers, but it seems to me like the young people coming up right now are just scary bright. Scary bright.
I pray that we're bound for glory, and I'll say goodbye.
Amen. Thank you a lot, Bill. Great to hear from you. Gwen in Maple City, Michigan. Hey, Gwen, what's on your mind today?
Well, I voted this morning. Turnout was huge. I live in a very rural county, Leelanau County. You're from Michigan.
Oh, yeah. I've been there. Yeah.
It's a beautiful place to be.
It is.
I'm the chair of our Leelanau County Democratic Party. We have fabulous candidates. We're working hard to get our county commission candidates elected. We have excellent state and U.S. House reps, Kathy Wojcicka and Matt Morgan, if anyone hasn't voted yet. Turnout was really heavy. I did this for my grandkids. I do this for my grandkids. I don't recognize my country, and I'm hoping we're smiling tomorrow.
Yeah. Amen. I'm with you, Gwen. And we will be if everybody listening gets out and votes. Gwen, thank you so much for the call. And greetings to Michigan. Linda, Deerfield Beach, Florida. Hey, Linda, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I just wanted to reassure everybody, I can in South Florida. If your ballot didn't have postage on it, don't worry about it. U.S. Post Office, we have an obligation to our own government. We make sure those ballots go through.
Wow.
Now the only thing.
Now you may be speaking for Deerfield Beach, Florida, Linda, but I guarantee you're not speaking for the entire United States.
Right. That's what I'm saying here. Like our boss is like, no, send it through. It doesn't matter if it doesn't have.
But that's a local decision. So please don't take that as permission to not put a stamp or two on your ballot. Whatever you need.
Well, we've been.
Although today is too late to mail an absentee ballot today anyway. So it's kind of a moot point. But,
right.
But I remember, Linda, I know that you're not one of those people who's trying to spread misinformation because you're the person that we've been talking for years about the Postal Workers Union and the food drives and things, right? That's the Linda I'm talking to.
Yes. That's
great. Okay.
Yes, it is. Postage is going up after January, but what we've been telling people here in Florida, because like in Broward County, your ballot's free, but in Palm Beach County, you had to pay. And usually it said somewhere within the ballot, like it was $1.10 or something like that. But I don't know how other states are running it. Right. But like I said, here, our postmasters and our district managers are going, no, we do not want to be blamed for this. You make sure that gets on that truck.
Right.
So,
God bless them. God bless them. I love postal workers.
Okay.
Linda, thank you so much. And great to hear from you. Thank you. Bruce in Palmdale, California. Hey, Bruce, what's up?
Hey, how's it going?
Great.
I'm 64, been voting since 72, the year they changed the voter for McGovern. In LA County, where I live, I drive a truck now. For the last 20 years, I've had mail-in, and this year they changed it to no postage. So
That's great.
Yeah, it is great. And LA County is a great example of how voting should be. I mean, when I did vote in person, I never waited more than 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous what it's unbelievable. I mean,
it's obscene. It is a crime against democracy. And what blows my mind is that the news organizations just calmly, oh, gee, look at how long those people are standing in line. What an interesting thing. Isn't that curious? No, it's not curious. It's a friggin' conspiracy to suppress the vote. Come on, start calling it what it is. Bruce, thank you for the call, and thanks for the story about how it's working where you are. You know, every place that has absentee, well, every place should have the option of voting by mail. And frankly, I think ultimately it should be you just drop it in the mail for free. But it's not right now, so well, it's too late for mailing anyway. But we'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
It's 47 minutes past the hour. More with the Thom Hartmann Program, Talk Media for the sane among us right after this. And welcome back. Vi in Doniphan, Missouri. Am I saying it right, Vi?
Yeah, you sure are. Good afternoon.
Okay.
I live in a sparsely populated rural area, but the election judges said that voting had been steady all day, and that's always a good sign.
Mm-hmm.
And let's hope we can get our ship of state uprighted a little bit with this election, or at least maybe started back to that direction.
Amen.
I'm feeling optimistic.
Yeah, and time to toss some of the garbage on the garbage scow.
You bet. You bet.
Let it float off into the horizon or whatever. It's not to use a pollution metaphor, but so your experience of voting was
it was positive, but it always is because I live in a sparsely populated white rural area.
Right.
There's no waiting.
Yeah. Although, the people who live in Dodge City, that's a sparsely populated.
Oh, I know.
But it's mostly Hispanic, and so they move.
The only place I can vote's like a mile out of town. There's no bus service there.
Yep. Because once the city became more than 50% Hispanic, the white power structure that controls the city decided we can't let these people vote. Are you kidding?
Right.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Right. I think that that's criminal. That is really a suppression of the vote. The Voting Rights Act needs to be reconstituted.
It does, because the Supreme Court gutted the last one, and Congress needs to assert their authority again. Vi, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Great to hear from you. Let's see here. Sharon in Albany, New York, watching Free Speech TV. Hey, Sharon, what's up?
Yes, hi. Thanks, Tom. You keep me sane.
Thank you.
So I voted today. I live in upstate New York in a minority-majority district.
Mm-hmm.
I never miss a vote, and today when I went to vote, my name was not on the master list.
Oh, no.
I was on a supplemental list. There was an additional printout. The poll worker said that had never happened before. I did get a ballot. I did vote, so that's all good, I guess. But I just think it's peculiar.
Is a supplemental list, does that mean you're on the list where if you don't vote in the next 2 years, they're going to drop you or something?
I have no idea. This was certainly not on my radar. I never had any issue, and it's something I probably need to and will check further into.
Please do. And when you call your local election folks or the Secretary of State or whoever you call to find out what that means, and they gave you a full ballot, right? Not a provisional or an absentee ballot?
No, they gave me a full ballot, but the poll worker, she did have a supplemental, a few pages long. She said she didn't know why some people were off the master list.
Right. Well, when you find out, would you call back and let us know so that we can, all keep informed through your experience?
Yes, I will do that. Thank you.
I would appreciate that. But generally speaking, in Albany today, it was good voting. You had a good voting experience.
The poll worker said it was a phenomenal turnout. We never wait long in my area, which is great. But today I did have to wait. I was happy to do it.
Yeah,
and they're very optimistic. They said turnout's been good.
That's marvelous. Well, thank you very much for the report, Sharon, and please let us know when you find out what this supplemental list is, okay?
I will do that. Thank you,
Great.
sir.
Thank you. Good talking with you. And thanks for watching Free Speech TV. It is 9 minutes before the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls as we head toward the end of the show here. Stick around. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, you know, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. People who support our program there get, you know, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to patreon.com/Thom Hartmann and check out what we're doing and support our program. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
And support our program. Welcome back. It is election day. Tonight we find out which direction the country is going to head. Jack in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hey, Jack, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I'm calling because I'm very upset. I think the Democrats are going to get the House, but I want to make sure that one of the things that they investigate would be social media. I heard a woman on your show over an hour ago saying that she'd been thrown off Facebook for giving a telephone number for voting problems, and I had a problem with Twitter. When I lived in Germany for 7 years, and I decided that I needed to make sure that no friend of mine or anyone who knew me would ever say they didn't know what was happening with a situation like Trump. So my job has been to get things up on Twitter and on Facebook. The other day, I wrote to Megyn Kelly, and I explained to her that in an analogy that her use of blackface to African American people is equivalent to someone calling her a blonde bimbo, which was in quotes. And I was suspended. I wrote a dissertation on metaphor.
Wow, that's remarkable. And you were, I mean, they shut down your Twitter account altogether?
Yep. And I have appealed, and I've even given them a link to my dissertation, which is on academia.edu, and I've explained the situation to them. So, you know, and now I'm writing them. I'm saying, look, who are you? Who's making these decisions? Because Twitter's become extremely important.
Yeah, well, the guy who runs it, Jack Dorsey, is a libertarian. I think. I don't know what to make of all this. I mean, the reality is that we have no constitutional rights on Twitter or Facebook. They're private corporations that you know, they can do whatever they please. We can complain all day long. It may or may not make any difference whatsoever. Their goal is to make as much money as possible. Period. End of discussion.
Agree.
Yeah. So.
But they shouldn't have that kind of power. They should be regulated, and our new Congress ought to put that at somewhere near the top of their list.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
I'm with you and the European Union on that. Jack, thanks a lot for the call. It's good to hear from you, and thanks for informing us about that metaphor. That's fascinating. Dayona, am I saying that right, in Prescott Valley, Arizona?
Yeah, hi, Tom. This is Dayana.
Hey, Dayana, what's up?
Hey, I just wanted to tell you, I love your show, and I love the service that you're giving to this country. And I found you again on Sirius. I had lost you for a long time.
Oh, well, yeah, we're here.
I'm glad you're there and doing strong. The reason that I've called is because I live here in Arizona, in Yavapai County, and I was mailed a mail-in ballot. Actually, didn't get to me until last Thursday, Then I tried to fill it in, and it was confusing because at the top it said sample ballot, and then down below it said official ballot. And I just didn't feel good about that. So it was too late for me to mail it in anyway. So I took it to the poll this morning, and I showed it to the poll workers, and they didn't know what the heck that was. And it was official. And so they said, well, here.
It sounds like somebody, it sounds like a scam. I wonder, are you a registered Democrat, Deanna?
I'm afraid to do that here. I'm a progressive Democrat, but I just put independent because I didn't want my rights to be offended.
Well, it sounds like
somebody
somebody sent you this in the hopes that you would fill this out and mail it in, and it would never be counted because it's not an actual ballot. And that is a scam.
Right, and that's what I'm saying.
Contact your local Democratic Party. You may be in possession of evidence of an actual crime here. So please contact your local Democratic Party and let them know what's going on, and they'll notify the appropriate authorities. Dana, I got to run. I'm sorry, but thank you for the call, and thanks for listening to us on SiriusXM. Thank you for being with us today. Get out there and vote. Get your friends to vote. Get your neighbors to vote. Tell people you don't even know to vote. Walking into the store, tell people, have you voted? Come on, today we've got to show up. You know, for all year long, I've been saying, you know, democracy's not a spectator sport. This is the day. Tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
From UN